catch-up show. It was only 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think. People are sort of saying, where you been, what are you doing? But I don't think it's been too long.
No. Space out. Yeah, I think this would be the second week, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we try. We try in our busy lives to bring joy to the small community that follows us.
Yeah, that's it. All three of our fans.
I think I have 3 followers on my YouTube now, so, mate, look out. I'm going.
Going places. Going hard. That's good. Well, I've got a couple of trial shirts made. Finally got one. Nothing flash, but, it's better than nothing. So I need to rearrange the patch so it comes down a little bit lower, I think, and stuff, but it was like...
Very professional. Marilia by design. Very sexy.
Nothing over the top, but, it's a start. Something. At least next time we go to a show, I can be identified.
You can. Did you make a ladies' range as well, or just the men's range?
I have a ladies' range, that's what I'm wearing, and I also have the men's range, and they all look the same.
Beautiful. It's just how you wear them. That's all it takes.
They come in all the colours, black.
Yes, excellent.
There's no other colour, just black. So, but yeah.
And have you been all right?
Yeah, just it's flat out. You know what it's like, silly season with end of egg season and into the hatchy season, and now it's feeding season. So it's trying to get everything feeding and sorted and trying to get enough feeds in to move on those animals that need to go to new homes and all that sort of stuff. So it's like, that time of year, everything's feeding, everything's pooping, it's hot, water bowls are dehydrating, and just struggling to keep up all the time, 24/7. So how about your end? Same, I'd imagine.
Welcome to reptile life. So mine's on a smaller scale of your epidemic facility over there. So
it's a bit of a epidemic.
I tell you what though, can you see that? I got bit by a snake today. Would you believe it?
Oh, he's been nailed. Oh, that looks juicy.
Oh my God, the pain. I'm actually glad snakes don't speak English, nor can they hear the absolute obscenities I said to that female jag today after she mistakenly missed the rodent and latched onto my hand and tried to drag me into her tub.
Did you slip a few profanities out, did you?
It was unpleasant. It was one of those grab and where they try to roll, but you just feel the teeth ripping through your skin, and it's just...
And it's like you can feel each tooth going pop, pop, pop. As they squeeze tighter as you try to fight them. Yeah. And
I was like, yep, you get back in your tub and you will not get fed. And then I realized what snake it was. And I said, okay, I'll have another attempt at feeding you once more then.
Win the argument. Yeah, I normally go straight to the sink, straight on the tap and turn the cold water on. They soon let go eventually sometimes.
She let go, lucky. It was kind of a big yank to pull me in. She realized she was never pulling me down. So she gave up. But yeah.
That was lucky.
It'll be a good bruise one though. It'll be a nice little trophy one to show through the week of, look, I'm tough. I got bit by a snake.
Oh, yeah.
I lived.
Well, that's where I got that worst one I had, just right in here. In the there's a nerve or whatever that runs in there. And that was the one I was talking about. It numbed 2 fingers and half my middle finger for like 3 months. It was just like pins and needles and everything. It was pretty bad. But it was a full-on food response bite. It had come out. I've gone in with the tongs. Completely missed the tongs. Everything bypassed the whole lot. Went, that hand looks tasty.
Yeah.
And one of the bigger carpets, it was wrapped up, and it was not pleasant at all. So anyway.
Not cool. You better say hello to some of the people who rocked in, mate. Like Lee Ward go the Knights. I hope he's not talking about last week's football. Surely he's talking about this week. 2 from 2. We won't discuss last week's football.
Yes. Oh, Mr. Deeb's in the house. He's taking front row seat as always.
Charlie Deeb first in as always. So I think he pays Telstra to put him in the first available slot on the stream.
I reckon. Mr. Dixon. Hey, Zach. Hope you guys are doing well up there.
The Beard Lord himself.
Yeah, Elizabeth, how you going? Staten Jr., Peter, how are you, mate? Carl Smith, evening. Mr. Boozatil, Troy.
Mr. Gangster.
Hey, mate. Harley Chapman, how are you? Mr. Muzz Williams, or Muzz, I'm not sure which way that is, Dave. You might have to
Muzz.
Say... Muzz, is it?
The Muzz. Yeah. Do you know about Once Were Warriors? Jake the Muzz.
Ah, okay. There you go. I should know. It's my wife's family. I should know.
Oh, come on, Darren. We had this talk the other night too, you dickhead.
shit too. It's all right. Oh, we're at Mr. Sunky, the man of the hour.
Hey,
Chris, hope
Mr.
you're doing
Artist Sunky.
well. Artist for some. Cough.
To me, he's my main man.
Ryan, Matt Vella, Mr. Hudspeth. Sorry, I'm trying to read.
Richard,
Donald
how are you,
Bennett,
mate?
hey Ward, Michael Ward, hey guys. Mr. Travs, my albino olive got me the other day, right on the tender part of my wrist. I'm glad you put my wrist in there. Yes, it's actually a nasty spot. My one must have like stuck a tooth like directly into a nerve or something around that.
Been there. Did you have pain up your arm for days after it?
Yeah, sore elbow, but it was the complete pins and needles in my middle finger and complete numbness in my thumb and finger. Like my wife was actually so concerned, she called the hospital, concerned of like tendon damage or something like that. If a tooth had got stuck in there or something like that, infection and all that sort of stuff. But all they wanted to do was ask questions about venomous symptoms. And I'm like,
what sort of snake was it?
Yeah, have you got a headache? I'm like, no, it's a python.
No, it was a children's python.
It's a big children's python. Fun stuff. Ryan, Michelle Rumley. Hey, Michelle, hope you're doing well. Zach, Donna Bennett, Ryan Shepherd. What's a bit like compared to your ink? I have my hand ink, but my snake has never tagged me, thankfully. To be honest, since I had this done, which has been a few years now, I haven't been smashed badly on this arm. It's always this one because this is the feeding and do everything with hand. And not this is the hook hand. So, I always hook with the left side. It was venomous stuff. I play with the right, so I've got more control. So I've just always learnt that way. So normally when I'm feeding, it's the same thing. Hook out with the draw, in with the rat with the big barbecue tongs, and sometimes
just hope they hit the mark.
Yeah, normally I know. Like, I imagine you're the same, Brent. When you're feeding some of the big fellas, if you open a drawer, normally the ones that are going to like come halfway out with their mouth open looking for food. So they're the ones you kind of stand back. And this one wasn't like that. It's normally one that is there and you open the tub a little bit and flick it over. This particular day, no way. It was hungry. Must have left it too long. Between feeds.
There's always an exception to the rule when it's that one time you lapse in procedure that you get nailed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, it happens. It's part of keeping snakes. Everybody cops it eventually. Mr. Sharpie's in the house. Hey, Jared.
Hey, Mr. Sharp.
Ledger Chapman. Mr. Muz. Rhymes like
Buzz, so it's Muzz.
Yeah, see,
Mr. Muzz Williams.
Wrong.
Well, it's like if you put the New Zealand accent on it, it's like Moose, because it's like Muzz in Australia. It's Muzz, but Moose.
Yeah. Well, it's Muzz. I thought it was, but anyway. Okay,
Muzz.
Muzz. Mr. Bahaja. Marty.
Oh,
Lord Love God from Queensland is in the house. The
beautiful man himself, the male model from Mudgee.
Oh.
Alan, g'day. Corey Farr, g'day, mate. No, they're all coming tonight.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's one of those topics with all the recent stuff that we've been seeing all over Facebook, some quite interesting topics. It's something we've been wanting to talk about for a while because, proving things out takes time. And anyone that's done it and put the time into it knows how long it takes. I was actually looking at Mitch Daly, is it? Mitch. Oh, what's his thing? I was talking to him the other day, and I was looking at his stonewash project that he put up a video of. Yeah, that's been going on from what he said there for like 8 or 9 years.
Yep.
So it's the time and effort required to put into stuff. So it's always a fun thing to do, and hatching something unusual. For me, that's what I'm here for. I breed mutations, I breed different things. We all hope that one day we'll hatch that something different in a clutch, which I was lucky to do, and take it from there and prove something out.
You fluked it, proved it after 27 years later.
Yeah, that's right. Don't want to rush these things; they take time.
Well, it is, mate. It's every reptile's owner's dream. As I said in the intro when I put the post up, it really is what we all breed snakes for, is to hatch something brilliant, something magical, something a miracle. And every egg can be a miracle. It doesn't matter if you're pairing 2 jungles or 2 children's or 2 olives to anything. any egg can be a mutation that starts if something magical comes out. But once the magic comes, then comes the process of how do we prove 100%, which is a word that's used fairly loosely at times. It has to be, it's guaranteed, it's proven that this is a genetic trait, something that can be outcrossed, passed on, and bred with other things and remade from those things. So there is a process that you and I have both been through ourselves several times. You were RC1 who got yours proven in a great amount of skill, and I've got to say, compliments to you. You did an outstanding job of proving those peppers out over a long period, because that, mate, probably many people haven't heard the story now, because I remember you telling that story 4 or 5 years ago at different herb societies when it was a proven trait, but there's plenty of new people in the hobby now that probably haven't had that story. It's a long story, but if you did the story, you proved it out without any doubt. There's no one can come along and go, oh, what about? It's proven, and that's, unfortunately, it's happens too often these days. People jump to conclusions a little early, and I get it, mate. We're all excited about these things. It's like,
absolutely.
Yes, it's got to be. I want it to be. It's the dream, but the work's got to be done. So that's where it comes down to.
And they're not something you can prove out in a couple of years, no matter, because things need, can they be reproduced? Okay, that's one direction, but they need to also be outcrossed, and we'll probably go into this a little bit more in depth. But you're talking just from that alone, many years. You're talking about producing the first clutch, holding the back, and looking at 2.5 years, realistically, before you can see any results from that first pairing. Yep. So, and that's without really, and subject to whether you've got a male that you can, put across multiple animals, or, in my case, a female left over after, anyone that's seen and heard the story. It was a time of rough trials for myself and everything else, but I had one female. So that's
a hard way to prove a project with one girl. You get one clutch.
Long road.
Yep. And before we start, Daz, I might do the public disclaimer.
Yep.
This is just Darren and myself's personal opinions. This is not directed at anybody, any project, any morph, anything that's happened in the hobby recently. Darren and I talked about doing these shows on topics of quarantine, topics of proving out things, topic of setting up things, for different times of year, for breeding, for hatching, for incubation styles. Like, there's a whole host of information that Daz and I are happy to share with the hobby. But this is something that we've talked about for a long time between ourselves about the right way to prove things out. And this is just our opinion. So please, no one take this to heart. There'll be things said that people will probably think are directed at them, but they're not. They're just mine and Darren's observations on things we've seen happen in the hobby in the past decade or more, where we've had things pop up, which we've all been excited about and gone, oh, this is it. This is going to be unreal. And then it falls flat on its face 2 or 3 years later, So there's processes that have been done that have made sure that can't happen. And we just hope to try and help and educate people, as always, of the right way things can get done. So please don't message me or Darren going, you're a dickhead, I've done this and I've done this, and it's proven. Like, that's cool. Like, each to their own. If you think it's done, that's cool. We're just offering our opinion on how we think it should be done, and how Darren's done it, how I've done it. I've done to prove things not a proven genetic thing several times. Darren's done it and proven one of the Aussie true homegrown morphs silver peppers. So, there's not many people in the country, I think, that would be able to stand up and say, I've proven a line out, because, in all honesty, it's not going to happen that often. It's as much as we'd all like to think so, it's not going to happen for us all. So there's very few. There's Wayne Larks, there's Roger Lester. There's a heap of lines in carpets and Antaresia and things that have been proven over the years. But, mate, how many lines have you seen, Daz, that have not proven?
Oh, over the years, more than I can poke a stick at.
Endless. I mean, every breeder's had something. I've had 2, 3, maybe 4 that I thought could be something. I know you've worked on a couple, at least 2, 3 that were nothing. Yep. You've got the pepper, so you're a god forever.
I don't know about that, mate. I'm just, you know, at the end of the day, that is just pure luck. It could have happened to anybody. The difference, I guess, is, you know, when I go back to then, when I hatched the first one in 2007, I knew absolutely didn't know a thing about genetics. Never understood it. Had absolutely no idea how recessive worked, what incomplete dominant was, and back in then it was co-dominant. You know, the old saying, "Oh, it's co-dominant," which is completely incorrect.
You were just a bloke who wanted to breed some Murrays.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it was, and it was kind of at that point. And back then there was no Jags, there was none of the other stuff around. It was pretty much albinos and peppers. It was the year that Simon Stone was actually getting the RPMs or the Jags.
Yes.
Was actually starting to produce those. So we had quite
reduced pattern morph.
Yeah. So, you know, it was a long time ago. It was before there was granites, before everything else was around. Unfortunately, it was a slow project.
Yep.
But, you know, it got there in the end. But I had to do my research. We didn't have as much access to, well, you know, the genetic information that's around now. Back then, I mean, that's 15 years ago. So I had to do a lot of reading and research on my own, and I had people try to explain things to me, and it took me a while. I couldn't get it. It just, you know, till one day I was sitting there reading and researching something online, and I was looking at a Punnett square, and it was almost like someone hit me in the back there with a baseball bat, and suddenly I went, "Oh, I get it. Yeah, I get it." Like I struggled, and I don't know whether
it clicks.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was just explained to me in such a way that, you know, I just couldn't get my head around it, or there was too much information. Yep. But as I read and tried to understand, and I was reading what it was saying, and I was looking at the Punnett square and backwards and forwards, and suddenly I went, oh, I get it now. And then when you understand that, suddenly you can start to go forward then, and you can see things, you know, the way, once you understand how the single basic gene works, you can then apply it to incomplete dominant. You can then understand what co-dominant means when you go and research that. And then it just goes on. And then all your different types, your T minus, your T positive, how they work. What's the difference between a T minus and a T positive? What's a chimera? What's a paradox? What's a mosaic? Like, there's so many things that can happen. Yep. And then you go beyond that again, and you start looking at, you know, which I'm still getting my head around. I'm certainly, we'll add a disclaimer, we are not geneticists. We are self-taught, and it's only what we've learned through talking to other people and the information we read.
Our own experience.
But then you go down to a whole cellular level, where during the egg development stages, they're mutations because the cells mutate. So you're then down at a level where, you know, you've got mutating cells causing something unusual that doesn't make sense. And unfortunately, what I see in the hobby a lot is, if something's different, it has to have some sort of genetic link to it, which is not the case at all. There is so many things that do not, you know, there's so many more factors in for something not to be a genetically inheritable trait versus those that are. And that's why you see heaps of unusual stuff, but very, very little actual proven genetic traits. And like Brent said, it's not a dig at anyone, and not saying that anybody hasn't done the time and effort into proving something, but that's just the reality of it. You know, it's quite rare to see something new actually get proven out.
But a true genetic trait is something that can be reproduced. So you can breed that to another animal and reproduce it in an incomplete dominant form, or make hets then, which will remake that as a recessive animal. So I get where people get very confused coming into the hobby with genetics. There's so many terms, and there's so many different ways people explain things. So in the early part, like Daz said, I was, you know, as everyone is, in shock with genetics when you first try and understand it, until you understand the processes and how each gene works, and then work out what each gene actually is, you know, to work out then the process of working with it. So there is a great book. You can't, I think it's out of print. I often tell people to try and find a book called Genetics for Herpers. Be careful when you Google that, because it'll bring up some very unfortunate links when Google thinks herpers is herpes. So if you can find the actual book, Genetics for Herpers, a few people have told me they've got it as an ebook downloaded. It was the book for me, which is a very small little white soft cover book. It's 60 pages or something, has the Punnett squares in it, and has a lot of simple pictures of blue-tongued lizards, for example, with ratios and things. That book for me, I read it once and had no idea what was going on. I read it a second time and thought, I think I get now what recessive is. And the third time, the incomplete dominant stuff clicked in where I could see, basically visual animals, in the second stage, and then the third stage of homozygous animals. But again, comes the terminology problems. Darren and I have often had this debate. We had it again through the week this week of what people call things. Like I've always called hets only things that are recessive, but technically incomplete dominant things. The first stage of those, or the middle stage, I guess, is a het for the superform. Exactly so people sometimes will use those het words, visual hets, essentially what incomplete dominant are, which just confuses the shit out of people trying to work out when they're thinking hets are recessive things, So there's a lot of different terminology. There's a lot of correct things. There's a lot of wishy-washy things. So it is a wild ride, but I beg everyone, get a book, read, study, ask questions, and it will work out. It will get very clear for you, but it just takes time,
And just taking our faces away for a second, that's that book that Brent's actually talking about.
Yep.
Not cheap, $350 from Amazon.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, I think I paid about $40 for it. That book's up there as a joke from someone, I'm sure. It's
look, I'm just there so people can actually see the book it is that you're talking
about. Yeah, that's the exact cover. It's been out of print for a long time, many years. I do have a copy, but it's very hard to find. Someone did once find an e-copy they downloaded and printed out, which would do. You only need to read it a few times. So it's not a $300 book, trust me. It's a $40 book. Very simple, very basic, but it's reptile specific. So it talks about, the whole book's based on blue tongues, and other basic, bearded dragons and things, but it explains things very simply with pretty pictures and 3 white ones and 1 black one, and it explains each stage and each process and what's going on. But it also does in later sections talk about the key words, heterozygous, homozygous, all the words that matter in genetics are all explained in detail. It's a good little book. If you can find it, get hold of it.
Yeah, it's always good. And a lot of that stuff too in those books, it doesn't change. Even though the book might be old, maybe there's more, more changes in terms of mutations out there, but the basics are all going to be the same. Another great book too, if you can get hold of it, is that Ultimate Guide to Ball Pythons from Kevin Morley. That's another really good book to read. It's a big book.
Kevin
McCurley, sorry, what did I say?
Kevin Worley. Yes, Kevin McCurley, the Ultimate Ball Python Morph Maker.
New England Reptiles. Yeah. So that's a very
beautiful
good book. Some quite in-depth stuff. I mean, we talk about people getting a hold of mutations here. Imagine if you suddenly upped and packed up, went back to the US and thought, I'm going to get into ball pythons. Good luck.
4,000 mutations later.
And the rest. Just trying to get even though you would understand the genetics, knowing the names for everything. And I'm more of a fan of, the old KISS rule, keep it simple, stupid. Or like if it's already got a name, I'd just rather combine 2 names together and,
call it the names of the genes that are in it. Not make up a name of, Wonder, Chukka, He-Man, something,
Yeah, that's just me. I know other people are the same, but, I'll just call them for whatever names were existed. The silver pepper.
Traditionally, absolutely. Traditionally, for new genes, I guess, people had the honor of naming something, like when you made silver peppers, that's the base gene. You got to name it silver pepper. It was something that everyone wanted because it needs a name, it needs a name, but in my opinion, when you make a albino super pepper, does it need a name of, let's call it the Rocky Mountain brown bear pepper? They all don't need a name. It's an albino pepper. It gets a little bit crazy sometimes with the naming rights of things, but
I think that
each to their own.
I mean, how many times? I'm sure you're the same, Brent. I'm sure many other people. What's a minglo? What's a snail? Or what's a ghost? So you're explaining it constantly, and obviously for those of us that are in the game, well, that's basic common knowledge. But if you're suddenly, someone that's jumping into a hobby and go, oh yeah, I want to get snake, and suddenly there's all these different names for it, you don't know what it is.
Yeah, but if they just said, I want a caramel albino, it'd be a whole lot simpler than I want a sunglow. That's part of the problem of the hobby. But
each their own.
Yeah. Interesting, but yeah, like we say, read that book you said, the ball python book. That the middle section of that with the yellow section of genetics inside that is absolutely mind blowing for anyone who wants to go to next level genetics outside once you've mastered the basics of it. That is a book I read and talk about. I nearly threw up after I read that section of that, and I nearly sent my laptop flat googling every second word in the sentence to understand what all those things were they were talking about. It's some crazy level genetics, probably one of the most in-depth sections of genetics reptiles I've ever read, and still don't understand it. I still go back to it and read things and just go, wow, it's in another world.
Especially when you start going into like sex-linked genes and male makers and female makers, and this and that only makes
ALS
this
stuff.
ALS, acts like super type things, where you've got, in the case where you have something sits on the same locus, and I'll raise a point. We'll talk about the exanthic sort of thing there for a second with the multiple lines. You can have what's called acts like super. So even though the locus point's the same for exanthic, you'll have different alleles for different things. So you can have two different mutations that sit on the same locus point but sit on a different allele. When they are combined, you can get what's called an acts like super. So you'll actually get a third visual mutation out of it. So you'll have two different individual genes that will make their own, and then you'll have, when they combine, because if they're not sitting at the same, if they're not allelic, sit on the same allele, then they're actually different mutations, and then you get a combination. And I guess extreme point of view is that if you had a patternless white snake and a patternless red snake, and they sat on the same locus point, and then you bred them together, and then suddenly you got a pink snake. Whereas if you bred white to white, you got white. If you bred white to wild type, you got hets. And same with the red one. Suddenly you get a third mutation. They call it what's called acts like super. So, it's just another thing. I mean, I don't think any of that actually exists. There's probably not enough mutations in carpet.
Not in carpet yet,
but yeah. So there's so much more that goes on, and I certainly
there is with genetics.
I claim to. Yeah. Should we knock out a few questions and we'll start getting into it? There's a few people that
we'll jump into the actual processing of proving the different polygenic incomplete processes.
So Thales, hey Thalia, what's your experiences with pattern mutations due to incubation spikes? Had some diamonds produce a clutch of stripes, very high mortality rate, unsure of background appearance. That's something that's quite common. I don't know whether that's actually, I know incubation was blamed for a lot of this stuff in the past. I don't know. I've actually had my incubator spike a couple of times in the past, sometimes up to near on 40 degrees in a short, sub 24-hour type time frame. Never had anything unusual hatch out of it. I've also hatched unusual stuff out of an incubator that has been sat on a lower shelf than other stuff above it, and the stuff above it is all hatched perfectly fine. And I've hatched some weird things from the clutch underneath. So I'm not saying that's not a possibility, but I think it gets blamed for a lot more than what actually is. So I've seen it. I think it was might have been Nick stock or Rex stock from memory, produced a really funky looking weird Darwin, actually called a ghost Darwin. It must have been mid-2000s or something or other. It was really weird. From what I heard, that was bred, never proved anything. The original gelatins that were bred by Tremaine, that was a clutch that was split with Tim Mensforth through URS, who I was actually working with at that point in time. Same thing, really weird, stripy, unusual, absolutely crazy. I actually have a photo of it buried on a hard drive somewhere or other. And Tim actually used and bred that animal and never produced anything or produced normal wild types. So, you can get these anomalies, as I like to call them, because they're not expected. But whether it's actually something reproducible, well, that's what we're going to get to. What about yourself, Brent? You seen stuff like that yourself, or?
Not in my stuff. I've had, fortunately, not any experience with mad spikes in incubation. And I haven't had that much weird stuff come out. I know you had those jungles that came out striped once, which one of the projects that you were working on proving out that didn't prove to be anything genetically striped or make more stripes even. There was a whole clutch of stripes, was it, that never made stripes again?
It was an entire clutch of stripes. I'll see if I can actually find thing, and that was completely unexplainable.
Yep.
There was talks of it being parthenogenesis at play, or self-reproduction, but even that didn't lay weight because none of the parenting animals had any striping whatsoever.
And mixed sexes in the clutch.
And there was mixed sexes in the clutch.
Yep.
And the entire clutch, they looked like there was variation between each animals, but when you looked at all the animals, they actually did look like, I guess, twins. They all very. I'm seeing if I can find a photo of one. But yeah, so there's plenty of weird stuff. But that entire clutch, I've bred stripe to stripe, stripe to mum, stripe to dad, striped everything else, and all just produced wild types. And that was a clutch of, I think it was 14, seven striped survived, 7 died in the egg. I think that was just because they were a little bit overdue from hatching, and by the time I got to pipping them.
Yep.
But yeah, they were quite crazy. Oh, here we go.
And then Zach, the Beard Lord Dixon, says, could the diamonds in question be intergrades? Certainly possible, and that's something that maybe the intergrades bring out some striping. There could have been some stripe stuff mixed in, where you think generally polygenics would see some amount of striping, some amount of wild type looking things. So I know that clutch of Darren's, everything was striped in your clutch, wasn't it?
Yep. So every single animal looked like that pretty much. That's a girl. That was from clutch. I'm not sure which clutch this one was.
They were pure jungles.
Yeah, pure black and white Cape jungles. So that was 2018, and that was already been bred back then. Pity the stripe doesn't reproduce, as I've typed there. That was after clutch of 24. Still makes some stunning babies. I still actually have the male over there. I've moved the rest on and sold them here and there and that sort of stuff. And not as anything genetic, just sold them as it's striped. It's pretty, but it's just a black and white jungle.
It's just a jungle.
Yeah. So, it's just one of those things that can happen. So that was an entire clutch that happened. Yep. And in that particular instance, as I said, I actually paired them back to each other. So sibling to sibling, so stripe to stripe. Paired females back to dad, boys back to mum, out-crossed them into some other lines that I had. The original pairing was a mum to a son, which is, why I thought, geez, maybe there's something going on. But the fact that was an entire clutch didn't add up. Like if you look at any sort of genetically inheritable ratios, recessive or incomplete dominant, you shouldn't get what you're seeing. And everything
full clutch of anything.
Yeah, yep. So I spoke to
not outcrossing it.
Yeah. So, and it's they kind of gave a couple of reasons, which I had to sit and Google for several days to try and understand. But in essence, even then, it's still kind of guesswork as to what the actual cause of it was. But there's something you could hatch out. And I had people offer me lots of money for these things, but I couldn't sell them not knowing what they were. I thought that's just me. But yeah, so going back to your question, Thalia, is there the things you hold back, you work on, your breed, you hope for the best, and maybe you might get something.
So let's jump into the process then, Daz. Like that's where I guess where things start. So pretty much anything people jump into to try and prove out is generally someone has something that's a visual animal. I mean, very hard to prove out something you think's a het. So generally these things jump into, I've produced something that looks very different. It could be a striped thing. It could be a silver pepper looking thing. It could be, whatever looking thing you think it is. You might not have any idea, but it's different to everything else in the clutch. It may be one, it may be 3 in a clutch, it may be half a clutch of things, who knows? But everyone generally starts with a visual animal, and then the process becomes of how do we prove this to be genetic? So we start, you want to jump in, Daz, from first process from where you start from a visual animal?
Yeah, so for me, I might actually do a bit of a picture thing here for to help along. So using the peppers, for example, I'll just go to screen share here again. So some photos. So anybody wants to go on Amelia by Design and have a look, there's actually an album there, The Silver Pepper Story. And if you go and have a look, it tells about what I did and everything. So,
novel.
Yep. So up here, these were the mums and the dads. So that's the male. He's still in the dry. She's going to dig him out and take some photos. that started it. So to me, they were just two normal Murrays. And then the first clutch that came out, I saw that in the clutch, and I thought, oh, that looks a bit weird. Didn't think much of it. As I said, I didn't know much about genetics, and then that happened. So obviously you can see here quite a distinct pattern variation to everything else. So once I kind of did some research and, to understand about mutations and recessives and all that sort of stuff, I had to grow them up. So skipping a few years of dramas.
But before you jump there, Des, I'll jump in for 1 second. I guess the first stage of visual is, what is it? You've got to prove the mode of inheritance. Is it incomplete dominant? Is it recessive? Is it polygenic? So, So from that next step, where'd you go, Des?
Yeah, so the next step is, well, obviously the first step for me was understanding genetics, because there wasn't a lot back then.
Yep.
So it was then trying to work it out.
That was 08, was it?
That would have been the original, that clutch there would have been, I don't know, there's no time date, but that was 07 I hatched this clutch. So that was in 2007. I mean, I had a lot of dramas, I had mental health issues, I had issues with the female not eating. There's a lot of John, so I probably could have cut out a few years if, life had been good. But that's the way it goes.
Life.
So I realised that to take it any further, I had to obviously breed back to pepper. Now, going back to the original pairing, I lost the female. So naturally, you would pair something, get something unusual and go, oh, wow, that's cool. And you'd obviously try to replicate
breed it again.
That breeding next year. Unfortunately for me, the female ended up dying from like 13 tumours. Just one of those things, unfortunately. So I wasn't able to reproduce the clutch, which obviously also put a big time delay. But if you did and you had that pairing, you'd reproduce it the next year, see if you actually got the same results. If you did, that's a good thing, points in the right direction. But where do you go from there? So for me, I knew I had to outcross. So there was a couple of things. One, I wanted to make sure that I could reproduce it by putting, because I only had the female and the dad. So it was to put the female back to the dad. So that was the only pairing. And when I produced that clutch, finally, I end up with these results. So I actually got 6 peppers and 2 hets. As you can see, 1 het here and one het there, and the other peppers. So that kind of gave me the idea that what I have is a reproducible trait. There was kind of no question, because I'd actually
you've made more.
I've made more. So that was a good sign, but there was still a mode of inheritance. Being only a small clutch and a small number of animals hatched, that was still not true. So then as things aged and things grew up, once I got stuff to age, there was 3 other processes I kind of wanted to do. One was obviously pepper to pepper. That was to try to rule out, even though I had a fair idea of what was going on, you need to rule out if it's incomplete dominant, if it's recessive. So even though in the back of my mind I already had a fair idea it was going to be recessive, you still have to make the pairing. Making that pairing gave me an entire clutch of peppers.
No superform, no wild types.
No wild types. So, I was pretty much on the money. So that was one. Then I had to, obviously, you think you're onto something, you do the outcrossing. So outcross silver pepper to albino to make the very first, obviously, double het pepper albinos. To add to that, just to make sure, we got pepper to jag, outcrossed. So, that was after I was finally able to get those ones you see breeding there are from this clutch here. So the boys in there had their work cut out for them, and I tried to make the outcrosses. So doing the outcrossing, there's one thing. It's one thing to try to prove that you have something genetically inheritable, but you also need to prove against it, I guess. So
you've got to rule out polygenic variation. You've got to see that it makes wild type looking animals somewhere else, not something that looks like what you've got.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to. I've lost my train of thought now.
Come on, stay with us, mate.
Stay with the program. Where was I up to? You threw me out now.
So you've outcrossed. You've done jags. You've done albinos.
Yeah. So when you're doing these outcrossings, like once those clutches start to hatch, you'll then start to look. As soon as I hatched out the pepper over the jag, the pepper over the albino, the pepper to pepper clutches, you can see in the phenotypes all the outcross clutches or wild types. No sign of any pepper whatsoever. Obviously, the original pairing of the pepper back to the dad, which was obviously a recessive trait over the heterozygous form, gave me that mix in the clutch as well with hets and peppers. So there was no doubt. Once I hatched those out, there was no doubt in my mind it was 100% recessive, unquestionable. This little photo down here.
You ruled out polygenic. You ruled out incomplete dominant.
Yep, this was the female. That was the pepper to pepper clutch that she laid here. And these are some of the animals that were hatched, over time. So just it was a clutch, just jags. These are ones I wasn't sure what was going on with because it was, in the case of these guys, it was the first time any of these combinations had been made. So I had no idea what I was looking for. Now, thankfully, I have some. But yeah, so when there's two sides, when you then go onto it, when people wanted to question me about what do you think about this, what do you think about that, etc., I had all the answers, had all the photographs, had all the documentation, so to speak. I mean, let's face it, you hatch something weird. I challenge anybody that's, sitting here listening. If they hatch something weird, what's the first thing you do now? You grab your phone and you take photos. You don't hatch something weird and not photograph it. So to say, oh, yeah, it is this, that, and the other, do you have any photographs to prove it? Oh, no. To me, that's a red flag straight away. Like, well, hang on, what do you mean? You've produced something new. You say it's this, but where's the actual evidence that points in the direction to prove what you're trying to say? The argument of, I said it is, it's good enough. I'm sorry, isn't good enough. A couple of pics. No, show me more. Show me the adults. Show me the kids. Show me the parents. Show me the matings. I want to see it all so I can go, you know what, 100%, I agree with you.
Absolutely. We talked about it before, Daz, of if you make up something in a scientific world and you want to write a scientific paper on it, you don't just get to write your paper and publish it. Other people need to scrutinize it and say, what about this? What about that? This could be that. It has to stand the test of science. It's not just a case of, it's got to be. It can't be anything else. It is a case of it is this because we have outcrossed it and it's made all wild types. We did visual to visual. It made all visuals. Oh, okay, it could be polygenic. But no, because we paired it to something else unrelated, it made all hets, nothing visual. So there has to be an explanation for every step. And then eventually, you need to reproduce it from those hets. It's got to come back to we made visuals again from outcrossed unrelated animals that made visuals in the ratios, which always works out. There'll be good and bad, as we've seen, but over 2, 3, 4, 5 clutches, which is what I think you need to do to prove something accurately. We're not talking one clutch wonders here. We're talking I've done 4 or 5 clutches of something, and over those 4 or 5 clutches or 10 clutches, like Daz has done, you will see those ratios come back to very much on the mark of a recessive trait clutch, when you're proving those things out. So I get people get shitty, they get offended when people question things because they take it almost as a personal attack that, oh, that's not right. It's this, and this, it's got to be that, people don't like to be questioned, I suppose, but often it's in the case of we're not trying to have a dig at someone. We're trying to help someone prove something correctly, the right way, so that it can be in the hobby and everyone can enjoy the thing. It's no point, half doing anything. It's of no benefit to anybody,
But it also removes controversy. Like now we sit here years later from when I started these guys, plenty of other people have now gone on to produce it and multi-gene combinations now, and obviously still more to come. There's no question. If you have to post something and then defend your actions and argue with everybody, what is that saying? Your argument should be, well, here's this, here's that, here's my proof, here's my evidence. What more do you want?
Yep.
And that's what I did. Like I had people question me when it was being done, and I took their comments on board and took their advice on board, and didn't argue, but had discussions. Like quite a number of people said, "Oh, it's probably incomplete dominant, and that's this, that, and the other." And I'll be, oh, okay, fair enough. Well, when I do this,
do the work,
I'll prove that out. But I don't think it is because this, and that. But I was never offended that people thought, oh, it could be this, it could be that, or whatever. Like, it doesn't worry me. The fact that I had more input from other people making suggestions on what to do and why have you tried this or have you tried that is all the more knowledge for more power. Like you learn and understand, and it's not someone's having a go at you because they question you. It's like making suggestions, and maybe it's just that they want to understand. I've had many times I don't work with exanthic jungles, and I've had many times I've questioned, Kevin Milner and stuff on the exanthic jungles, and it's nothing negative towards them at all. It's just I don't work with them. I get curious of,
you don't get to see, you don't see the clutches. You don't see the results firsthand, so it's very hard for people to look from the outside at a photo. Like I often get people referred to, I've sent stuff to other people and they've looked at it and they've said it's this. Very hard for people. People send me pictures of things and say, I bred this. Do you see a color in this? And I'm like, I can't see anything. Like the cameras sometimes don't pick up what people are looking for. It's very hard to get a photo of certain things that you're trying to see as a trait in certain things. So photos are not always the best way. You need a lot of pictures, or someone needs to see the things firsthand and visually inspect things sometimes to see what you're seeing. So it's it's a case of you've got to do the work. You got to do it properly. And sending pictures to someone and saying, I think it's something, and them saying, yeah, I think it is too. That's cool, but let's do the work, eh? Like it's.
Yeah. How many people have sent you photos of normal Darwins or albinos and gone, oh, I think it's a sunglow. Oh, it doesn't look like a sunglow to me. Oh, but my mate said it is. Well, breed it to outcross it to something else and see if you get caramels or hypos in the clutch. Prove it out. But I think
it's very hard. Some things are hard to pick. I still struggle at times with albinos and sunglows, and I think is that an albino? 3 months later, I go, okay, it's definitely a sunglow, but it's got some size on it, colours are blending, but out of the egg sometimes it's like variation's a killer, especially when you're talking mixed species things, when you've shoved in, like we talk about, some Murray stuff, some Bradley stuff, you've obviously got some coastal and Darwin in there already, those different species send things off the scale of suddenly you've opened up new DNA, you've got a whole new colour palette mixed into. Where do you pick it and go, oh, that's got to be an albino? Ooh, be careful, it's people get very excited about calling things sunglows at times that probably aren't sunglows.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that kind of leads on to understanding terminologies as well. Not just going, oh, it's hypo. Well, what does hypomelanistic mean? Understand the meaning, and that it doesn't necessarily, as I've spoken before, doesn't necessarily mean it's a genetically inheritable trait. It simply means lacking in melanin or less dark pigmentation. Doesn't mean it has none, just lacks it. So, subject to whatever the wild type version of that animal is, can be taken either way. It can reference other animals as well. You can look at T plus children's and go, well, they're hypomelanistic. Well, that's the descriptive term of it. Yeah, sure. That has no melanin. A paradox in the side. T plus has no melanin in it. So, understanding that, understanding T plus, understanding T minus, what they do, how they work. A hypo doesn't mean it's T plus. T plus doesn't mean it's hypo sort of thing. They can be held genetically different. If you look at coastal hypos, which are incomplete dominant, and T plus, they are completely two different things. They're not the same. You don't categorize them the same. It's either one or the other normally. Like you don't hear people calling T plus children's hypos. They're T plus children's. It's a form of albinism. It has children. There's a reason for it. So I think understanding those terms and how they differentiate is beneficial too when you're trying to prove something out. Keeping an open mind is what could be causing whatever it is that's going on. Obviously, having a pattern mutation is a far easier thing to work with versus a color mutation. So color mutation is, when I say color mutation, with exanthics and caramels and hypomelanistic type things. So you've got all different types of color mutations, and then you have your pattern ones, your zebras, your peppers, your granites. So you've got all that kind of different stuff as well. So having an understanding of how each of those works and everything makes a difference. Obviously, proving out a pattern stuff is far easier. It's visible straight away. You work on something that's a slightly different shade, that can be a far different, far harder project. As Brent said, you start
unless you're talking albinism,
well, something
or
extreme,
or piebald, But yes, when you're talking something variation in shades, when polygenic variation comes in and destroys your life, it's a different ball game,
Yeah. So you need to outcross. So if you've got anything, the most important thing is not only trying to prove for the trait, you need to prove against the trait. So you hatch something weird and unusual. That's great. Try to reproduce it the following season. That can tick a box going in the right direction, but that animal needs to be outcrossed. You need to try to prove that gene's not reproducible.
To an unrelated animal, not brother, not sister, not mother, not father, not auntie, not uncle, not nothing.
Yep, you need to be completely unrelated, and that way you're putting whatever you believe might be genetic into something that has no genes whatsoever. So if you believe it's a recessive trait and you pair it to something unrelated, well, theoretically, you're going to have wild types.
Yep.
There will be polygenic variation, but they'll all be wild types. So if you put a Darwin with, what's a good example, Brent? Darwin with
an albino. So if you had an albino and you paired it back to an unrelated Darwin, just wild type Darwin, perfect starter.
Yep, you're going to want all wild types in the clutch. There's no question with it whatsoever. But in the same scenario, let's just for argument's sake say that albino happened to be incomplete dominant. You put it with a wild type, you expect half the clutch to be, depending on whether that gene is a homozygous version or a super form, you'd expect either half a clutch or you'd end up with half a clutch or a full clutch of heads.
Let's call it a green snake. Let's do a scenario. I hatched a green snake. Okay, I've got a lime green snake. We paired it to an unrelated Darwin, and it made a complete clutch of just normal Darwin. So then you say we're looking at a recessive gene.
Yep. So you're going to end up with obviously an entire clutch of heads. And if it was incomplete dominant green snake, subject to what the parents were that created that snake, you're either going to get a half clutch. If that was, let's just for argument's sake say that was a super form, that green snake, you're going to get an entire clutch of, let's say, light green snakes as opposed to lime green snakes or bright green snakes. So you then have to obviously hold those back. I really hate these analogies. It just confuses me. I like to work with real stuff. Yeah. So, but it's proven. Let's just go with caramels and stuff because at least we know the forms. Zebs and
incomplete.
Zebs. So yeah, proving out incomplete dominant can take a lot more work depending on the color palette. So if we look at something that has a caramel, for example, you want to take it and outcross it to something completely really dark. So something completely dark where if it's a heterozygous form, so it carries one copy of the gene, you're going to get half a clutch of caramels, half a clutch of wild types. Yep. There's going to be a substantial difference between the two in that clutch. You're going to get a clutch of really nice light colored things and realistically quite a few dark animals of half the clutch. So it's fun. Yes.
Yeah. Basically, in a nutshell, I guess I can wrap it up, try and do it quickly, which is not perfectly, but in a recessive gene, I'd like to see someone who made something outcross it to something to make heads, unrelated, and those heads go on to then make visuals, in recessive ratio. So a quarter of the clutch would be visuals. I'd also like to see them repeat the clutch 2 or 3 years in a row, and I'd like to see them do, okay, we've done visual to visual from the original line and from the outcross line and got a full clutch of visuals from that line. So, we're ruling out getting super forms, we're ruling out getting wild types. As you say, incomplete dominant can be a little bit harder work. Incomplete dominant always meshes in with polygenic at times, that you might take that animal and outcross it and suddenly, we've got half a clutch looks sort of normal, half a clutch looks a little bit like the phenotype that we're looking for, the one that we think could be something, and then we've paired up those and we've made what we think could be a super form. But is that just polygenic variation? Have we just taken those two the extreme versions of what we got and made a better version of it polygenically, or is that the super form? But then the ratios come into play. With a polygenic thing, you'd see the whole clutch would be something that looks a little bit like that, and some look even better again. There'd be nothing really that would go back looking wild type as such. So you'd have some wild type, some of the what you're looking for, and some of the super forms. But then to fix that, you go and take that super form and breed that back to an unrelated wild type and get a whole clutch of those back to, your visual form that you started with. You think, okay, cool, that's probably looking more like incomplete dominant now. But it's a case of you've got to outcross. It's a simple part. I guess the best thing we can sort of say to anybody is people working with animals that are in the same gene pool, the DNA is all very similar match, and you will get weird things happen inside the same bloodlines. So perfect example is years ago I got some Stimson pythons off my buddy Shane Plank down in Melbourne. These things were making what looked like pied Stimsons. You got some photos there, Daz, of a few things that popped out of these. I sent some Daz some pics. Yeah. So this was a little line that popped up. There's a lot of talk about this line way back in the day, but anyway, Planky got hold of some of these. He bred them for several years. I think he did maybe 3 years of these, of the same pairing over and over and over, and was getting these things that were all white in the body, some deformed like that one, but very much almost a piebald looking snake with some very little pattern on the head. Some had little patches on the body. And everybody's thinking, wow, this could be piebald stimmies. There could be something special going on here. And ratios looking good. We're looking at 2 or 3 in a clutch of 10. That's something that could be looking like a recessive gene. Who knows? But they were coming from wild type parents, so we're thinking maybe these things are hets. We're making visuals from hets. So 2 or 3 years of breeding these, none were ever viable. None ever got out of the egg. If they got out of the egg, they never lasted a day or two. So they were something that was not a viable answer. So Shane continued to breed these things over and over. And I said to Shane, can you take one of these hets, Shane, and breed it to an unrelated wild type stimmy, which he certainly did. And out came a full clutch of wild type looking stimmies. And I said, cool, but it's not incomplete dominant. You wouldn't think, if it was, probably there's no visual there. So it's wild type to wild type. So we're thinking if it's recessive, then all this clutch, I think there was 8 or 9 in the clutch, they were all potentially POS heads. They're all 50% POS heads if this thing is a recessive gene. So I took on that project from Shane. We did a little deal, and I bred every conceivable possible scenario of those 8 animals I ended up with. So the 4 boys, 4 girls, bred every single which way. Took 5 years, but bred every male to every female to rule out every single possibility, and never again saw anything that resembled those animals that we were seeing in the original pairing. And that's because I believe whatever was in that original pairing was something that was a defect that was making those animals, they were deformed quite often and not viable, so they were dying. So although they looked visually different, they were obviously not something that was reproducible. But at the same time, the outcrossing of that animal, which was a het clearly, well, probably, we can't say for sure, but whatever that gene was, outcrossing it fixed it. We opened up the DNA and we brought in new blood, and suddenly that problem, that defect that occurred that made those animals is gone. We fixed it. So we could have kept breeding those original pairing for 10 years, 15 years, and we would have got the same result over and over and over and over. But outcrossing does a couple of things. It fixes problems. We've seen it in albino max and other lines where outcrossing, bringing in new DNA, repairs problems. We saw it in albino olives where there's defects suddenly can be fixed by outcrossing and using those outcrossed animals to make stronger versions of those, which still carry the genes. We still have, the genetic phenotype we want, but without the associated issues. Yep. So you've got to do the outcrossing to prove things out, and often will repair things, which sadly for my little project that I did with Shane on that one, that fixed it and we never saw it again, so it's the way to prove the line is not what it is, but the end result is, that's not a genetic trait that's ever going to be passed on.
No, and that's a prime example of many things that hatch probably every season that are never reproducible, and people jump on something, and you hear some of the dollars people offer for something without any proven background to say that it is what it is. As people see something unusual, they jump on and go, "Oh yeah, this is the next big thing. It's going to be all this and that and the other." But do your due diligence, guys. Doesn't matter who it is or what they say it is. If they claim it's something new, ask for the proof, ask for the evidence. So that you're satisfied. Like we said, this isn't about anybody in particular or anything. This is about protecting yourself. You don't want to go out there and spend big dollars on something new because you think it's the next best thing. If there's no backing evidence to prove it is what it is, you could be paying thousands of dollars for something that won't reproduce.
Yep.
Something that, might make some nice animals. And then on the sadder side of that, you then get someone that does that, doesn't know what they're doing, and then does the same thing and then passes it off as the same thing. And so you get this snowballing effect. Yeah, of misinformation and stuff, and people thinking they see what they do. I mean, we look at snows and moonglows. How many snows out there claimed as moonglows when they might not be? Because they're extremely hard to pick as a hatchie. Not from my personal experience. I'm talking to people like Frank and Jared and everybody else that spread them. Wayne, Larks and all those guys. Even they say it's hard to tell within the first 12 months. They need to get some size and get some colour on it to pick the difference. But, people sell them as hatchies. Obviously, some are obvious. But if they're developing that colour, that yellow, later on in stage, and when we look at carpets as a whole, the melanin always gets developed later on in stages. So, I remember breeding carpets back in the early 2000s that were hypos, so to speak, had no melanin. But by the time they got adult size, they had as much black as their siblings. They might have had a lighter background colour and been nice animals, but they were just still coastals.
Yep, absolutely. I've certainly seen it many different projects over the time. So Matty Trost said he's done that with his paradox and couldn't be happier. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, it's got that beautiful albino that popped out of nothing. That's certainly an animal that is bred, and there is no sign of anything happening there. 6 months, 9 months later, boom, things start to pop out. So some of these things take a little bit of time to pop up. So,
well, that kind of leads into another thing: line breeding. When you're line breeding, I guess in essence, the common stuff, or when you're line breeding for a particular trait, the options for having, let's say you're breeding carpets and you're trying to make banded carpets, you breed a couple of carpets together and you get like 2 or 3 in the clutch that have nicer bands or something else, or let's say ocelots. Ocelots is a good one. There's ocelots around. You go, oh, geez, there's a couple here that have ocelots on it. I'm going to start line breeding for ocelots. It's not a genetic trait. It's just a polygenic trait.
Yep.
You take those 2 snakes that have the most ocelot appearance, you hold them back, assuming they're a pair, you breed them together. You're going to enhance that oscillation in those animals in the next generation, in your, F1 generation from that pairing.
Limiting the DNA pool to just, hopefully DNA that is in the ocelot range.
Yeah. So you're starting to drop off the allele selection patterns and traits that you don't want. So banding, striping, that sort of stuff will start to disappear from whatever the line is that you're working with, and more oscillations are going to occur up. But while you're doing that, there's also the opportunity to start digging out genes that may have been passed on from generations prior. So there's also the opportunity for that something weird and unusual to be drawn out and reproduced, because the common stuff's falling off that you don't want, because you're looking at this specific trait here. You want to make a completely oscillated carpet python. So you're working on that trait. And as that goes along, suddenly, you might get a cell defect or something that's drawn out, and suddenly you might get, wow, this one's got a really unusual color, or this one's got a really unusual pattern, or look at the eyes on this one, or the tongue, or the belly scalation, or something is a little bit different. And then you go, oh, well, I'll hold this one back and work on it. So the opportunity for more unusual things starts to pop out as you line breed over multiple generations. It doesn't mean it is. There's just a chance of that happening. It doesn't mean just because you've line bred something for 10 generations doesn't mean anything unusual is going to come out. But
you're just limiting the results.
You're limiting the results. Yep.
And that's certainly the case with those beautiful albino Bredli that you had the wonderful brainchild of making. That original albino boy was a striped albino, yes?
Yes, he was.
Bred to a wild type Bredli, and
Yep.
all the heads came out very much sort of a range of Darwin looking heads and a range of some Bredli looking heads, but nothing that had striping as such. You know, there was no, oh, gee, look at the stripe on this thing. But suddenly, once I got squeezed some of those heads out of Daz in a brilliant maneuver from myself, suddenly we popped out some visual albino Bredli, 50% before everyone jumps. Shit, calm down. 50% Bredli cross Darwin's, 50%ers. But there was some stripe stuff in there. I've got a couple that came out that were visuals with striping, and everyone's like, oh, how does that happen? You know, the parents are just very wild type looking heads and there's no striping, and everyone sort of says, look, you're only getting the DNA down from the parents only. It's my belief those parents carry a wider DNA range than just what's in those, and obviously that parent of albino Darwin was a full striped animal, and that's come through. So it's in the range that in those hatchies I got some striped, and I got some very banded looking Darwinish short of patterned animals, and I got some very Bredli pattern. I got some yellow albinos with very extreme Bredli dog bone looking patterns on them. You know, so it's a wide DNA pool, because you just shoved a striped Darwin into a Bredli, you've got this huge open wide DNA pool now. But once then we go and take those striped animals and breed them back and pair them up to each other. Yep, beautiful animal. Glad you did it. Yep. But once you line breed those striping animals, so if I pair my striped animals, we're trying to then rule out, the banding, other options. So we try and limit the DNA. They're carrying a wider range, but we're trying to breed back and get, okay, we're only going to get a smaller range now. Most of them will be striped. There might be the odd one banding here and there. And then if we take the best stripes of those again and pair them up again, we're getting even a smaller range of DNA of, we're looking at, we're basically only going to get, 90 something percent of stripes are going to appear. So that over and over and over, you just generally refine the lines to get back to, you can basically make clutches of striped things in the majority of the time.
Yep. So you imagine doing that with, something you've done 10 years of work with. Yep. You put 10 years of work in something and then you suddenly outcross it, you're going to see a strong influence from one side to the wild type side. So making that pairing after you've done 10 years, let's call it 4 generations of inbreeding to make really nice stripe stuff, then you suddenly take that and outcross it to something unrelated. You're suddenly going to get a mix from wild type down through to stripe. Now, for someone doing that for the first time, they go, oh, I'll buy one of those off Brent. Oh, it's genetic. Well, no. No, it's polygenic variation, because you've got
some stripe.
You've got extremes from both ends of the scale and a blend of everything in between. You might get more stripes, you might be lucky, you might not get any.
Yeah.
But that simple thing, when you've taken something that somebody's worked on for such a long period of time and suddenly throw it onto something else, especially if it's perhaps something related or something like that, and you get it all, you can start claiming it for yourself as, oh, it's this, that, and the other. But doesn't necessarily, unless you know the history and the origins of those animals, and how much time and effort that has been put into it, just because you've taken one out crosses something else. I had someone tell me that striped jungles were genetic because they took one and made stripes. And I'm like, yeah, but you've got to take into consideration the history of those animals. There's many generations of people breeding stripe to stripes to produce stripes. So if you put something striped over something wild type, there's bound to be something in there that has some striping. It's not genetic in terms of recessive incomplete dominant. It is polygenic. So there are other things you need to keep in mind. I was just trying to see if I actually had a photo of the original pairing of that albino and the Bredli.
The magic. Yep, that's certainly true what you say, Des, of line breeding. I've got those reduced pattern Bredlis that certainly started off from something everyone looked like stonewash. I certainly was on the train of, I hope it's stonewash, and did the work to prove it, disprove it. But now I've done 3 generations of those animals, which is a polygenic line that does help me with in the early days. We did some work together, proved both ways. Can't be recessive, can't be incomplete dominant. It's got to be polygenic after lots of work pairing and outcrossing and pairing up outcrossed animals. But we've got to the stage now. I've got a beautiful line. I'm happy. If the results that are coming are fantastic. So
Yeah,
I'm like, yep, okay, that's cool. It's polygenic, but people are often disheartened by it's polygenic. It's almost got a bad ringtone to it. People go, oh, I don't like that. It's just polygenic. The just polygenic thing is probably a product of people go, okay, it's not a gold mine because it's not recessive, because recessive is the gold mine. Incomplete dominant's going to get made much easier, much quicker. It's going to be more round, easier to make. So, and polygenic's just whatever. We can just make them over and over and they'll go nowhere. But if you really put some work into, I've got 3 generations of those line bred animals, you can make some stunning animals and continue that 4, 5, 6 generations in to make absolute extreme levels of animals. But like Daz said, you've got to be very careful when you take one of those that's 4 generations line bred for something and think, oh, I'm going to take that extreme reduced pattern, hypo looking reduced pattern bredly, and imagine pairing that with an albino and then getting that in an albino form. Well, that's not going to happen in one stage because you've basically taken half of all that work away. You've stripped it back to adding a whole bunch of 50% of new DNA, which has got Darwin blood, Darwin colors, Darwin banding, the phenotype of Darwin mixed into your years of polygenic work. So you'll get some, your het albinos that some will look a little bit like those, some have a little bit reduced pattern, but you're basically going to make albinos and start again. You've gone backwards generations, and then you basically start again of, okay, I've got this albino one that looks a little bit reduced pattern. Let's pair it up with the best other one and breed them and start the whole process again. So you're working with the recessive gene then, but taking the best polygenic versions of them to build on something again, which might take another 3, 4, 5 generations to get to where you want to be.
Yep.
So it's...
But there's also, just because it doesn't have, in terms of polygenic, just because it doesn't have that recessive trait, doesn't mean it's not good, because that can add so much influence into whatever it is you're working with to improve the quality of a recessive trait, depending on what it is you want to achieve. And it's one thing I do. I work with so much polygenic stuff, it's not funny. And, to give some ideas on, things you can achieve. I don't know what pictures are out here. High yellow stuff, for example, like these Zeb Jags I've been working on for quite a few years. Polygenics. Yes, it's a zebra jag, but the reason it's high black and yellow is because I've been line breeding it into high yellow, black and gold jungles constantly to make high percentage Zeb Jags. Same with these. These are siblings. This has now moved on to someone else to breed, but the same thing. And then you can look at, my white line coastals, this xanthic guy, being so white, striped
It's
albino.
a ghost, Daz. It's a ghost. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, striped albino. So this guy, I've taken him, put him over a female, and, now you can see in the F1s, some of the ones I've held back, you can see the pinstriping in them already. So they'll breed back. Yeah, so they'll breed back to him this season. So this is a polygenic trait within a recessive trait. Yep. So polygenics are just as important as another one, that has the stripe. And when those 2 stripes are paired together, well, what do you think the outcome's going to be? You're going to have even better striping because, as I mentioned before, the less...
Almost ball python looking, that thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the less chance of your normal albino type patternings will fall off and more stripe stuff will pop out. And going back to the xanthic stuff, this little happy chappy that wouldn't sit still for a photo. You see the whites. Yep. Once again, it's polygenic trait within the last line of xanthic animals. So there's plenty of other opportunities. Polygenics is a great thing to work with within a trait. So many people just breed gene A with gene B and leave it at that. But there's so much what. Look at albino peppers, for example, albino granites. You can do work within those lines with variation within it themselves to make high contrast or high yellow or whatever it is you want to do. So don't rule out polygenics. And also introducing something in a polygenic trait. You breed bread line, suddenly go to Brent and go, oh, wait, geez, those stonewashed look bredli you've got are stunning, even though they're polygenic. You put that in your line, and suddenly you're starting to work with a better quality line of animals. So it's huge odds. It's just understanding it. But
it's endless. But people got to think about their pairings. You talk about your albino peppers. Your darker line got lighter line. There's all those ways you can pair up those animals and take it in totally different directions. I've got a white line albino pepper. I've got a yellow line albino pepper. More pattern. We've got, in your caramel stuff, you've got really reduced pattern caramel peppers. All those things will once mixed out into the world, will make completely different looking animals. So I think in the next 5 years, we'll see, just a pepper gene, for instance, as we see pepper gene mix into different collections everywhere and different lines of things and all this new DNA, there's going to be some crazy variation of the pepper gene, So, and we've seen it in albinos. People forget about, albinos of the original Blondie days, to compare to the variation in albino lines these days. It's, it's vastly widespread due to outcrossing and the mixed blood stuff that's all over the hobby now. That's going to be the same with any gene. So, people just need to pick something and develop it, like you've done with your things and like I've done with the albino granites. Pick a trait and go, let's go for this, let's go for that. White line goes, white line, albino granites, whatever, line breed those things to get to what we want.
Yep, there's plenty of opportunities out there to breed all that sort of stuff. But unfortunately, with proving things out, there's no short roads. Sorry, there's simply no short roads. You need to outcross, and doing one outcross in my books isn't enough. You'd really want to take an outcross to multiple different lines, different outcrossing. And if you think it's got something genetic, doesn't mean you have to outcross within its own species or subspecies, so to speak. So if you've got something, you think you've got something new in Darwin, doesn't mean you think you've got some new mutation in Darwin, doesn't mean you have to put it with another Darwin. If you think it's a new mutation, then why not step outside the realm and go, I deal with peppers. I'm like, well, I want to make black and gold peppers, so I put a pepper over a jungle. Still getting the same results. Still produce
pepper over Bradley. Put pepper over Murray. Oh, sorry, not a Murray.
Yeah. But, good reference.
Pepper over whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, if you've got something new, it doesn't hurt. And if it doesn't pan out, doesn't work out, so be it. Move on the animals. Just be honest about what you've got, obviously, as we always say. And move them on. But it doesn't hurt to go, well, I'm going to make some outcrosses. Well, even if you put them in something genetic, if you want. But I prefer when I did these, I actually preferred making sure that I single as well, not just multi-gene outcrosses. So
but document the journey. That's part of the proof. I know you've got, from day dot, every pairing and every clutch shot. Anyone who breeds snakes, you take photos of everything. I know at hatching time, my phones are loaded with hundreds of photos of clutches, eggs hatching, they've shed now. You have a ton of photos of the whole process. You've often got photos of things mating, so you've got pairing pics. Tell the whole story. It's the best way to prove anything is the facts. When, we've seen it over the years when things have just magically appeared and, I've got this animal. Okay, where did it come from? I just come from this and that. You got pictures of the parents? No, I've just got this animal. What? Did it appear from the magic portal, or did you breed it? Show us where it comes from. Tell a story. It's part of the process of bringing the thing into the hobby. And at the end of the day, no one gives a shit where it actually came from. Just be honest with it and work with the line of what it is. Prove it out. Bring it into the hobby the proper way, so everyone can enjoy it. Everyone can explore it and do what they need to do with it.
Yep. That's it. Be honest. Unfortunately, I've always said, it's simply based on greed most of the time. People get something unusual. Someone, tries to get it for cheap, and something, what that's worth, and suddenly it's pure and simply about money. And there's been multiple heaps of animals over the years we've done. The albino blackheads, the albino max that John ended up with the reptile park. All these things that have suddenly popped up. Albino Darwin's, the Simon Stone ended up with all these things that have, popped up in the wild marble children's. all this stuff that's suddenly popped up here, this, that, and the other.
Yep.
People pay, and I don't begrudge that, But when if you're going to take that gamble and buy something at huge dollars, then be prepared to lose your coin. If you've got the spare money to throw away 10 or 12 grand on something because you think it's new and it's a one-off, this, that, and the other, be prepared to be broke.
Or more.
Yeah, or more. Yeah, or more. I've heard of people paying ridiculous money for stuff that
Unproved.
produce nothing.
And fair enough, when new mutations, this is why I guess people need to understand when something new comes onto the market and it is a proven line, that's why they cost so much money, because they've done the work. It's years and years and years of work, and it's a new mutation. It's simple supply and demand. Everyone's going to want something that's new to make new combos with it. So it's not going to be a cheap animal. But when someone has something that has potential to be new, that's not the same dollars as something that is a proven genetic animal of whatever, of incomplete dominant or recessive. So I often see people talking about different projects. There's a few for sale now. I know someone asked about the Black Murray project, Elizabeth. We didn't come here to talk about specific things.
We'll get through all the questions in a minute.
Yeah, we'll go back to the questions, but the general consensus is something that's unproven is never going to be worth what a proven genetic animal is. So, you've got to weigh up in your own mind of how much risk you want to take trying to spend the years of work to prove something that may well be nothing. So, Are you comfortable spending 20 grand on a project that proves to be a bunch of children's pythons, for instance? At the end of the day, you're going to sell a whole bunch of children's stuff for, $150 each. Is that going to get back your 20 grand? Probably not. So it's just everyone's got to take their own risk, I suppose. But everyone needs to understand what they're buying into. It's a nice payday. Everyone thinks it's a wonderful thing to prove something out, but very few of these things actually prove out. So.
And the same thing, if you're buying something you believe is proven, the breeder or the person that's proved out, like myself, you want to know the proof. Hey, it's all there. It's all there in the story. I'm really by design anyway. There's plenty of information there, but I have all the proof that backs it up. Obviously now, many other people are doing it. So anyone that has a new mutation and claims it as such should have the evidence that says, here's what I've done. And if you question it, well, they shouldn't get the shits about it.
Yeah.
Because you're only concerned about your own, for want of a word, not being ripped off, I suppose.
Yep.
Do you due diligence? Do you go out and buy a car and the guy says, "Oh, it's 50 grand, mate, it's brand new," and you go, "Oh yeah, sounds good. I'll just give you the money for it." Then when you pick it up, it's a rusted bucket of crap. Due diligence. Do some research. Make sure it is what it is. If they can't give you the photographs of that car to say it's in immaculate condition with low Ks on the clock, are you going to give me hard-earned cash? What's the difference? Yeah. Same thing. If they can't prove to you that it is what they say it is, I'd be questioning whether I hand my money over or not. Anybody that has done the time and effort to prove out their lines should have no hesitation whatsoever in passing on those details.
Yeah.
At least show not two photos, like his clutches, his adults, his offspring, his this combination, plenty of evidence.
The full story. I mean, I've sat through your slideshow, Daz, of the Pepper story many times at her meetings and societies and wherever else, It's boring as batshit. I've heard it 100 times for me, but for new people, it's bloody exciting and it's a cool story, And at the end of the day, it proves that it is what it is, and you deserve to get paid for that. You've done the work, you've proved it out, then fine. That's why they are what they are, because it's proof. It's a real thing. We're not just coming up with one animal and saying, "Oh, mate, I want 20 grand for this because it's a, yellow and black and green striped thing that's going to set the world on fire." Well, mate, do the proof, sell it. So we might go back through some questions, Daz, before we get stuck here all night, eh?
Yeah, I just got to look at the time. So I've actually kept I haven't looked at who's been asking stuff. I've kept it from where the last question was. So we'll just go through. What's this one?
Jumping on Matty Travs, where is the said magic portal you speak of? Asking for a friend. That's a funny term that I think you were there that night, Daz. We went to a meeting with Shane Simpson.
Yes.
And Shane Simpson actually made that funny comment saying
Yep.
the magic portal of animals that arrive in Australia. And he was talking about some virus stuff that came into Australia. And
Yep.
he believes the magic portal was located in Queensland for some reason, because he said, funny enough, a lot of these new viruses and things all turned up in a very short space in Queensland. So if you need to find the magic portal, Mr. Travis, head north, apparently. That's where it's believed to be located.
Apparently that's where Harry Potter lives. We said Harry magic portal. Yeah,
I think there's magic portals all over the world if you look hard enough. But,
where one portal closes, another one opens. I'm sure that's what happens.
Be careful what comes through the magic portal, though.
Yeah, so what's Jermaine? Where do you think would be in your collection if you never hatched a silver pepper? Mate, I'm not going to lie, the silver pepper has been a great thing, and I'm sure anybody else, was lucky enough to produce something would say the same thing. In terms of what would I have, I think obviously my collection would be different. I wouldn't have all the pepper combinations. I'd probably have less animals because I wouldn't have the pepper combinations. But in saying that, I still would have had other stuff. There still would have been granites here. There still would have been xanthes here, albinos. So I still would have been working on all sorts of other stuff. So this just gave me, let's face it, a free avenue to produce to start working on a whole heap of new mutations, which I'm sure anybody else would have done the same thing. But I don't think my direction would have changed. I think I still would have been doing the same thing. I've always enjoyed the genetic side of it and the combination side of it and polygenics and all that sort of thing. I still enjoy wild types. I still breed plenty of pure wild type stuff. Most of that gets wholesaled. So, this is kind of the fun stage. When you breed something, you make the hets and you got to grow them up, and then you produce something else. And then, and as Brent alluded to earlier, what I breed with mine is different to what he breeds with his, and what you breed with yours is different again. So you've got all that polygenic variation within those mutations. So,
yep. You got the golden ticket to say to Ness, I need these 600 holdbacks because it's part of proving out this genetic silver pepper program. Yeah. So you actually had a legit excuse to have every conceivable combination of pepper on the frying.
Well, it did. I obviously couldn't afford to buy every combination, but, I bought enough to do what I could. I couldn't afford to buy a snow. I had the ability to make my own, but just didn't get one. So, that's the way it goes. I didn't have the money to buy a snow or a moonglow when they came out. So, unfortunately.
Should have asked me, mate. I had a couple of spare ones.
Yeah, the fun and games with it. What else? You breed, Alan Forbes, you breed anything nice in the department, take them. Well, not here, you haven't taken any of my stuff, but Mick Waters, they took Spencer off me for being too fat. Well, I haven't heard that before. There you go. Did you read that one?
Oh, that looks expensive me for too. Who? The department?
Yeah, that's how they got it. I don't know. Sure, it wasn't a rescue. The department will often confiscate things when they do busts through drug raids and stuff like that. So often the police will get a tip off. And that's how national parks will get them. It's not necessarily a confiscation due to, being nice or being obese or anything. You'll find there's a lot of stuff national parks gets through. It's either non-releasable rescues, as in, if you get a Darwin python find in Sydney, obviously you can't release it here. It has to be rehomed, as an example.
Yep. And generally parks, I think, don't have that much power without trying to downgrade who they are, what they do. And generally, when you get into those sort of things, we're talking about border security get involved in most of those repossessions, of off licensing or imported things or illegal species things. And mate, they have the ultimate power. They do as they please. Parks don't quite have that sort of reach,
Yeah, that's exactly right. Bren, where are your racks from? These are Vision racks, the ones sitting over here behind me. The other melamine ones that you can see in the background, I built all those myself. I mean, oh gosh, 16, 17 years ago now.
Yep. Vision. It's a hard thing to find these days.
Yeah. Colin Ray, I ain't even Colin. I'll be in touch with you this week if you're still hanging around.
Don't worry about Daz. Send your animals to me, mate. Daz has got too many. He's run out of space, I heard.
I'm sending him some.
Even more reason you need some space, Colin. There must be something you need to send down to me.
Yeah. So obviously Shakita looked up that book when we were talking about that. Yeah, $349. Good book though. Sometimes it's worth the pay. That's probably expensive. If you hunt around, you can probably find it cheaper. Obviously, it's good to know.
Yeah, I doubt it can be found. So find the ebook is the answer, I think.
Yeah, look, Zach, you need to put Jet there. I'm not quite sure why Brent gets a bit of that as well.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate your love, you beautiful man.
Yeah, Mr. Venom Staff was there. There you go. Some of the ball python morphs. I'll pop these up and we'll just read them as we go through. Some of the ball python morphs are absurd. Like it makes the side pack slightly faded in this 10K. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and the dollars over there are huge for them. I remember being over there when Barchek had produced the very first scaleless ball python, Mr. Smooth, and hits was $75,000 a pair. So imagine selling a pair of snakes out here, and I think we sold 3 pairs while the time frame we were there. Like that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Bit of a retirement fund.
Absolutely. But I guess in the States, a lot of that stuff is proven, like we talk about what we're talking about tonight. Yeah. It's so much of that stuff that's new is popping out and proven, so.
Yeah, nutmegs.
Nutmeg.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. They do put the time and effort into breeding and reproducing and stuff over there. It's a different league, I think.
I think you produced a nutmeg through a few of those clutches you hatched out over the peppers over the years.
Certainly there's certainly some variety. I really need to get a whole heap of them and take one of those photos of them all in a bucket. But I just get too lazy. So could obviously going back to the striped diamond things, should they be integrated? Yeah, I had some really nice striped integrated years and years ago, long time ago. Stunning. It was an interesting post I saw today. Someone saying, integrades they're a wild hybrid between diamonds and coastals. That is not correct. They are not a wild hybrid. They are their own genetically they're their own species. That they live in the middle of the two. They are their own python. Integrate's a really, really bad name. I mean, we were trying to get rid of them, calling them Port Mac carpets and all sorts of stuff, trying to get away from the term integrate. But you have diamonds, you have integrates, and you have coastals. You might get a blend closer to, but
blending up into jungle eventually.
Yeah, but you're in the middle of integrate territory. They're not diamond cross hybrids. That's what you make in your house. These are wild animals that have been there for tens of thousands of years. Serious. What's the next one?
Locality.
Yep. Serious side. How far into the next season are you guys? Still feeding. What about you, Brent?
I fed all day today. Hence the scarring. Look at the scarring. That's feeding wars.
You should try feeding them rats instead of hands.
Yes, well, still full scale feeding here, mate. There's most stuff is absolutely ready, up to size. It's just all those last few females I'd like a little bit more meat on coming into season. So I know a lot of people get antsy and keen and want to get in early, and there's certainly some animals that will breed early and produce clutches, but many pairings, as we've seen over the years, that go in early don't produce anything. So I'm never in a rush to get in early and start pairing things up. Everyone's collection is different, though. Everyone lives in different climates. Everything is on a different schedule. So everyone does their own thing. For me, I'm not really looking at pairing anything up until June, July. I find when I look back at where my eggs are all laid, 60 days, 90 days before that, I look at the pairings and ovulations, and I find that late June, July is my best time of when they all turn into November, December clutches for me that are hatching. So it's still feeding time, absolutely. And for us, certainly here in New South Wales, I don't know about the rest of the world. I know we've all been affected by flooding and cold weather, but summer hasn't really been a really hot summer. So I'm not. Today we've had a little bit of warm day here and lots of stuff fed really well. Some on my hand. Everything's excited about food right now because there's some heat, So I wanted the snakes to enjoy that before we sort of slip back into a natural cooling phase as soon as winter kicks in a few months.
Yep, the same. Still feeding. I don't fight winter. Tell everybody that asks me what I do. I don't fight winter. I don't fight the weather. I don't stop cooling in April because it's the 1st of April. I stop cooling when the snakes stop feeding. Simple as that. Males will go off their feed first. That could be middle of April. Could be the middle of May. Could be middle of June. It's really subject to Mother Nature. I see people. Some things do go earlier in season, like chondros. But it's subject to where you live, your temperatures. Just because things are mating now doesn't necessarily mean it's good. So
Antaresia and a few things sort of kick off first. It's traditional.
Yep. So my message: don't rush it. When it gets cool enough, you'll know. The pythons will know. The girls will probably still feed, but the boys will start pacing their cages and won't want any food. And that doesn't mean you need to, he's pacing his cage and not eating, let's pair them now. It doesn't mean anything. The female still needs to be cooled and cycled. So give it time, don't rush it. And, once the weather gets right. Oh, here you go. Brent knows all about mosaics.
Darren was Googling it before the show, mate. Tell us your mosaic story.
I have been. Well, I can tell you what it says, but that's not really explaining it, so I don't want to. It is not something that I can.
Google is the answer to that, I think, because Google comes up with some pretty shitty answers on things that are, being researched and better answered in different areas,
Yeah, I mean, it says here genetic mosaicism is a post-zygotic mutation. So there you go. That answers that question.
But in reality,
yeah, there's a lot more to it than just a simple explanation. And I'm saying that because I don't understand it 100%. As our disclaimer at the start, we're not geneticists. And I'm trying to learn this and understand it so I can explain it to other people. Like, no different understanding how tyrosinase positive works and what it is. So, but it takes a lot of research. And then when they start bringing up all the other big words that go into genetic stuff, because I tend to look more at, so not just Python type stuff, but scientific paper type stuff, which is all very technical. I don't understand it all. So I research it so I do understand it all. And that takes time. But, the main reason is that was because of the children's that Steve Carruthers is producing. It appears that that's what they are most likely to be. So, but yeah,
it's much like the paradox. Oh, for sure. It's much like people have often said to me, paradox chimera. There was obviously the crossover, and people have called certain things what they think are chimeras, what they think are paradox. My understanding was paradox was still just a single snake that displayed two phenotypes. So it might be a wild type thing with albino patching, for instance. Chimera is actually two embryos merged, so it's two snakes with two separate DNAs in one. But it will still reproduce, if it ever reproduced, as one or the other. It's not going to produce as both. I mean, much the same way paradox do. So, but chimera is actually two animals merged together. Or a paradox is not. So there's different terminologies people have tagged on things which are not always exactly correct by scientific terms, but we're also learning.
Paradoxing is random too. There's people get paradox. People have put paradox to paradox. Don't get paradox. It's random. They're acts of random anomalies. There's only one that I know of, and there's could possibly be others, but there was a Python, I can't remember what it was now. It was an albino that was linked to a paradox gene, so they were linked together. So if you've got an albino, they are all paradox. So you couldn't have just a normal albino; it was a paradox albino. They were gene linked. But it's more of a random occurrence. So I mean, many people have tried. Whereas chimera, as you say, is basically two, and how the sex works out is depending on the reproductive organs. So if the reproductive organs are from mum or dad, so it depends on the parents. So if it's from the albino or the wild type, it depends. It might not be albino, but it might have reproductive organs from a wild type.
And we saw years ago when the Larkses did the albino pairing, and everyone was a little bit shocked when the albino sort of made some wild types, albino to albino, because I think that albino was breeding as a wild type.
Yeah, but I think that was because they were expecting it to be both paradox to paradox. So expecting at least to get albinos. But I actually saw that animal, and I said to Deb when I was there, I said that if you look here, you can see the pattern variation. I said that's not paradox, it's chimera. But but anyway, it's like all that stuff makes it interesting, doesn't it?
Yep.
So what's
Still lots to learn.
Oh, heaps. That's what reading and Google is. You sit here for hours a night reading and stuff, trying to
share,
learn.
and we can all learn. That's what I've said to a couple of people this week about different things. You know, if we all share our information, we can all learn together. There's things we learned this week, Daz, about certain things from a couple of posts we had up that, you know, boom, new information. Thanks for sharing. That's things can be learned from information. So when facts come out and it's backed up with
screenshots,
things that prove out, bingo. You know, it's good.
Yeah, it raises questions. Be good to have a pub catch up, wouldn't it? So, Elizabeth, I had a similar incubation temp spike, got to 40 degrees for less than 6 hours, and 10 out of 11 babies were severely kinked. Only the non-kinked baby lived. Yeah, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a temperature thing. Could quite possibly be a temperature thing. You know,
at 40
is very hot.
Possible.
That's pretty nasty heat there. But then
the genes. Was there zebra in that by any chance, Elizabeth? Because I know in my experience with zebra, I've seen more kinking in zebra gene animals than any other morph put forward. Whether it's not just talking about tail kinking in supers, I've seen it in normal zebras. I've seen it in super zebras. I've seen it in wild type animals in zebra clutches of neck kinking, body kinks, all sorts of things that. Zebra gene seems to bring out some very wild gear.
I've had the same with a few zebs, some really funky, freaky looking things. But as you saw, Brent, defects with can occur with anything. I actually showed Brent some photos of some the man. Actually, I can share them. I think Scott Iper, for those that don't know Scott, he does quite a lot. Great author, and his wife Ty, both authors, have some great line of books. Both very highly experienced venomous keepers, great people. And he actually produced some, I suppose you could call them two-headed, I'm just trying to find my face, missing me somewhere or other. Two-headed, what was it, collets, I think, a death adder and something else. I'll see if I can get these up. Scott's a great guy, but you think with a guy so much experience could actually pop snakes, but he can't. You had to look at our videos for him to learn. I said I'd give him
I wouldn't be keen to be
that.
I ain't popping venomous stuff, mate. I ain't coming around anyone's house to pop that shit.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Elizabeth says, zebra jag by zebra. There you go. It's
that's probably a good reason.
It's certainly a common thing in the zebra gene there.
Yep. So these are compliments of Scott and Ty Iper. So this was a adder that they produced. So these are not related type things. These are just random. So you can see how you split here with almost two heads, and then that was the babies eating. See this one down the bottom of the screen, and that's a lot. Must be the other way. There is the other one. Oh, there it is, and there's the other one. I think that was.
And that's these are pure species of animals.
Yeah. These are just from vens. I just had some breeding with some vens. Yeah, we're actually talking. He said, "You ever know anyone that's ever produced 3 two-headed snakes in a year?" And I'm like, "I don't know anyone that's produced one."
No, definitely not. I think Dave Raptor produced one in the carpet once that died. It's the only one I've known that I've seen myself. But people often blame mutations for these things. It's funny how a lot of pure lines produce some of these mutants, I guess you could say. I've had it in pure Bredli. Pure Bredli with the brain exposed out the top of the head. Had it with organs popped out through the inners. Massive kink things in pure zebra jungle lines. I've had mutations produce some weird stuff too, absolutely. But it's not just mutations that get it. Pure species of things will do the same thing. So,
100%. It's just part of it's nature.
Faye's very correct. There's some weirdo humans can pop out as well. Pure human.
Yeah, definitely.
We all know one or two.
Sorry, let's see that is a lot of interesting part. Yep, certainly will, Faye. Get on that. Tremaine. What's this one? No, I can't read all that. It doesn't fit on the screen. So Tremaine says, in any silver pepper, has anyone ever produced the exact same mutation from completely unrelated pairs, or in any species? Sorry, has anyone ever produced the exact same mutation from completely unrelated pairs, like someone producing albino carpus from a pair with no albino heritage. It's still the same as albinos around. Well,
So
I mean, like,
are there other peppers? Is that what they're saying? Is there peppers produced somewhere else other than your silver peppers?
well, you can unrelated mutation. So it's like saying, has somebody ever popped up something else that's the same as whatever exists? So it is an example of albinos. I mean, like you could say, excuse me, you can look at albinos as an example because you had the original Blondie line from Simon Stone, and then you had the other White Phoenix line, but they were all compatible. So, you know,
probably the same mutation from different areas.
Problem is, I'm led to believe both those animals were wild. Well, I know Simon's was a wild caught on a rescue or something or other up there, and
yep, the caravan park.
Tried to say his was the same, but who knows? It was just out related or something new. I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest thing we have is we don't have the ability to wild collect. So most stuff is something somebody's caught somewhere, and that's how it ends up in captivity. Overseas, obviously, they can wild collect, and that's how they get so many mutations so fast because they take clutches and clutches of stuff out of the wild and hatch stuff that way. Excuse me. But I don't know, other than Xanthics, Wayne produced his out here and other lines. There's nothing else, I think. I think all the albinos are the same. I wouldn't really say there's two different lines. I'd say that's all the same stuff. But
probably the same gene. Yep.
Yeah.
Punch up that picture I just sent you. There's Jared Sharp just sent me a picture of a two-headed, looks almost like a ghost. What pairing's that from, Mr. Sharp? It's a two-headed animal, almost to me looked like a
photos when you want
Xanthic or something.
Yeah.
Obviously didn't live, Mr. Sharpie. That can happen with anything breeding wise. There can be deformities, there can be defects. It's not always related. I know certain people tend to blame the morph people. There you go, pure Murray Darling. So got that Murray silver look to it. So yeah, the head pattern. Now I look at it, very much Murray.
Sorry.
So yeah, that's some weird things that can happen from any particular pairings. I know I've often been blamed of a morph breeder. You're creating mutants, but quite often in pure species of animals, these things will happen.
Yeah. We had Joe. She said, "Is that done with Platinum X? Our data points to recessive." As far as I'm aware and know, Pete's probably done more work with Platinum X than anybody else I know of. He's got heaps of them.
He'd have the numbers.
Yeah, we wasn't sure at one point. I know we've had several discussions over him, but obviously he's done a bit more work since then. And that's interesting. So there you go. So time and effort, you look at someone like Pete that's had decades and decades of experience breeding, certainly knows what he's talking about, and even took Pete years to obviously try to work out what was going on with Platinums because it kept throwing a spanner in the works. But one thing I give Pete his credit to is data. He keeps immaculate records of everything, and the history of it. So, when he's not sure, he can look back at all that stuff. And that helps paint a bigger picture, when you've got that history there. So, there you go. I don't know. We'll have to have a chat about that one day. We'll have to go and talk about those little tiny Antaresia snake things.
Bloody dirt snakes. Get out of here. Like Ryan and Elizabeth saying, there's a couple of two-headed snakes that lived in...
seen them overseas.
Yeah, I was going to say Ben and Jerry, yes, and Cookies and Cream. And there was another one I saw when I was in the States. It was Thelma and Louise. I don't know if it was Brian's one. It might have been Jay Brewer. Might have had Thelma and Louise. I can't remember what species it was, but interesting to watch it feeding. That they'd feed one head before the other, so they wouldn't get a bottleneck of rodents in their throat. It was an interesting process.
Yeah. I've certainly seen them around. I just don't know of anyone that's actually had them other than Jared now.
Well, living ones that are adults and feeding, there'd be very few in the world, I imagine. It'd take a pretty special set of circumstances for one to live and be viable.
Yeah, definitely. So Richard Hudson, this is a bit of a long one. It won't all fit on there, and if I put on, I won't be able to read it. But he says he's been working on two different phenotypes that are expressed in the same line. It's a damn headache to separate the two and prove them out individually. One of them I'm only 2 steps away from proving out. The other is 3 to 4 steps away. Years of work to go. That's exactly right. Yep. I have a lot of respect for anyone who takes these things to fruition and finally proves them out unquestionably. 100%, Richard. And that's the thing. Like, he's someone else that's obviously working in it the right way, and he's still years away from proving it out. Like, you can't proving things out in a couple of years and going, oh, it is because I said so. It just doesn't work. You need to do the backing and the evidence unquestionably. And I'm sure when Richard eventually gets there, like everybody else that works on it, you'll have all the photos and data and why it's taken a while to get there. And respect to you for doing it, mate. Good on you.
And I certainly get why people do it in the dark. There's a couple of projects I've worked on in the quiet. There's some that I've made a bit more public and talked about. But I guess when you start to try and prove something out and you tell people about the work, you're going to get people jump all over you. You're a dickhead. It's that. It's this. It's you don't know what you're doing. It's never going to prove out. Like there's always going to be a whole bunch of opinions. So many people choose to do the work quietly in the background, but gather all the data so they can say, hey, look, back in 2000 and whatever, we did this, we can unveil the whole project. And people are often shocked when people come out with a whole story, got all the pieces, got all the photos, got everything, and you say, oh, wow, no one knew about it, but someone's actually done the work and proved it all out. So
yep. And when it comes out and you've got all that evidence to back it, they get nothing but praise from all those, like I'm more than, love to see more mutations proved out and added into the hobby. I think it's fantastic, but due diligence, do your work, do it the right way, like I mentioned about the stonewashed Bredlow. Brent had stonewashed Bredlow. They proved to be nothing. Other stonewashed Bredlow around. Some people look like they might have something proven, but the work's not done there yet. I still haven't. So other than Mitch, I think, from what he was saying, and, I'd love to have a good old chat with him one day too and just to, talk about the work and what he's got and what he's produced and everything. But looking at the photos, it's looking like the real deal sort of thing.
Yep.
But
still some work to do, like as much as those things make animals that look like stonewashed jags and make beautiful animals, I hope they prove out. I'm praying for someone to, in Australia, get a line proved out. It's great for the hobby. There's been so many things over the years of, I don't know, since I've been talking stonewash stuff for 10 years, people have all, messaged me and talked about this, that, and whatever. There's been so many come and go over the years. It'd be nice to actually get something here in Australia that's a legit proven thing. So,
and unfortunately, you can't tell what genetics are from the picture. So, just because you show someone a picture and go, what do you think it is? I can look at something and go, yeah, it looks like that. That doesn't mean it is. You still need to do the work, time, and effort. Doesn't matter how experienced are or who you are. You can't tell anything from the photo. I'm sorry.
No, mate, I've sent pictures of some of mine to Nick Martin, who said, mate, that looks stonewashed to me. And I said, well, it's proven not. It's there's certain key factors he showed me to look at. Some have it, some don't. There's some inconsistencies there. So
same with the stripes.
It's hard, it's very, very hard to prove. Those striped animals I paired up didn't make any stripe stuff, 3 or 4 weird things that popped out, which was nothing like what I was trying for. It was like a left field result for something. I was like, oh, great, here's something else really I've got to hold back and work with, but it was
fun of it. One door shuts, another one opens.
It was far from the recessive stripe program I was hoping for, but anyway, that's just more fun, more work. So
that's it. What's he saying? What's your mate? I chime in here and add bad luck to the mix, and sometimes you need to repeat pairing to get a visual animal. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yep.
Definitely.
I mean, some people think they get visual stuff because they get something weird, or they cut open an egg in their early times of breeding and something hasn't got the pigment developed, and they're like, oh, something exciting. I mean, I remember, there's so many things out there, calico BHPs. I've heard people say, oh, yeah, it's genetic, it's calico. I'm like, calico BHP, it's random. I know people have done calico to calico and never produced a calico. I know K Brothers did quite a bit of work with calicos, and Bob Withy had some of the first calicos I'd ever seen, which was at an expo in 2004, Darling Harbour. Bob Withy had one of his calicos on display down there. Never produced calicos.
Yep.
So, there's lots of stuff around that people think, but not reproducible all the time. Troy Buzatil looking forward to. He's looking forward to providing out his moon, possible moon. What are you going to provide it with, mate?
Spell checker got him a good one.
Oh, spell checking. Yeah, proving it. Well, that's right, mate. You know, it's could be, might not be. Who knows?
Going to be providing us all with some supermoons, hopefully.
Yeah, providing us all with information. What's this one? I like all these interesting comments. I saw a post today about fading bread lies, where over time the pattern disappears more and more with each shed. Have any comment? I've never seen one that fades. I've certainly seen them change colour. And when I say that, I mean it's just a thing that happens with age, like most pythons do. What about you, Brent? You've probably bred more variation in bread lies. I've bred plenty of wild types in my time, but
yep, I was never into Bredli, but somehow 10 years ago, I'm all sorts of into Bredli a decade later. But certainly those reduced pattern animals I've got, I wouldn't say the pattern disappears. There's a reduction in pattern on the sides that starts quite small, which I would say spreads out. So the area which is massively reduced and lost in colour gets bigger as it gets older, I suppose. Colours up and develops. I don't know about a fading of pattern though. There's I've certainly seen in Bredli there's that age-old project of the black Bredli that animals that hatched didn't really look very dark, but as they got older, they certainly coloured up and developed a lot more melanin, got darker as they got older. And one of the founding animals was a very dark animal, but also was a very old animal. So unclear whether that was a animal, that was very black, or whether it just had high production of melanin late in its life. So there's been a lot of those projects around, and that's what makes me think with some of those projects that have been around 10 years, where are they? Like if we're going to see the stuff, we should have seen it, like years and years. There's been plenty of time to breed those animals and prove them out by now. So
yep.
So
I see people prove stuff out, and then they probably make all the claims and ends up eventuating that it's not what they say it was and not what they thought it was, and they disappear off the face of the earth. So
yeah, disappear. But hopefully, we're the first to admit we would want to see more of these projects in the hobby. If there's melanistic lines out there in any species, bring it on. Like, we want to see those things in the hobby. We're not here to discredit anyone's projects, but we want to see them properly proven out and in the hobby for real.
The whole point of this isn't to take a dump on people. It's here to give you a heads up if you're looking at buying something that's new, to look into it to make sure you're getting what you want to pay for. I mean, some of these animals are quite expensive. I know people paying well in the 5 figures, $20,000 for stuff. If you're going to pay the money, make sure you're getting what you want. And if that person, I've said it before, if that person can't prove to you beyond reasonable doubt that what you're paying for is what you're getting, ask yourself, are you prepared to throw that money away? So, you've got to ask yourself. So,
yep.
There's plenty of weird stuff. Yeah, Brent, this one's for you.
I thought on Black Murray project. Yeah.
Project.
Like I say, we didn't really want to be specific with our name thing tonight, but I guess that Black Murray project has been around. I'm not 100% aware of the actual facts, but from what I know, that did produce a couple of black animals. One did die in the egg, one did last a little while. I don't know if it was weeks or months, but certainly did not live very long. Passed away as well, sadly. Repeat pairing has been done once or twice. Blacks only came in one clutch. And now I believe the siblings from those animals are for sale, not the parents. So I don't know why the parents have not been bred more to try and make more. Obviously, the visual animals will be a greater starting point to try and prove the line out if you've got something visual. If you're working with the siblings to that, obviously you're hoping they are all possible hets or hets and you can crack the combo. Ideally, you'd want the parents to try and make more or breed one of the siblings back to the parents, etc., etc. So that's all the pitfalls of trying to prove out a new mutation. Certainly, it appears that if there's one or two black animals in there, which would be unreal, if we could get Black Murrays, boom, imagine having Black silver peppers, mixed into this, that, whatever, like in pure Murray stuff. Like, it opens up a world of possibilities with a melanistic project, but it needs to be viable. If that was just a one-off freak, 2 black animals, and they never produced again, how good is it? It's
exactly right.
Sadly, yeah, I'd love to see it. Someone, please make it. But it's years and years and years of work. Lots of people messaged me about that project, and I said, man, I hope someone gets it. Man, I hope it's a win. I hope someone buys those siblings and somehow they make something or outcross it and get some poss heads, and suddenly something goes on to make a viable black animal would be fantastic. But it's years and years and years and years and years of work. So whoever's ready, step on up.
Yeah, I mean, if you come out with a new mutation, you prove it out, we'll be the first ones to support you, 100%.
Big time.
We do these things because we like the hobby. We like to see the hobby grow, But we also want to see people doing things the right way and not just trying to, do a cash and grab, and if you don't like it, bad luck, bugger off. If you don't believe me, stiff. Like, put the evidence down. You got the evidence. We'll support you 100% all the way.
Yep,
Definitely.
More genes in the hobby is better for the hobby. We look at new stuff that's come into the hobby in the last few years in silver peppers and the granite combos and other things that are out there. It's good for the hobby. There's new stuff. It's exciting. There's combos everyone wants to make, and as the price gets more affordable on some of these things, more and more people will get involved in them and take them in different directions. So if we suddenly just drew a line in the sand and there was nothing new, things would get very boring in 5 years. There'd be nothing new and exciting coming.
And the fact that there's more and more stuff, genetically, more and more stuff's being inbred, so to speak, regardless of what it is, the more chance of unusual stuff starting to pop out, So, which is a good thing. Less wild caught stuff around now, not as many people interested in the wild type things. Everyone's into the mutations and stuff. And I mean, there's still, don't get me wrong, there's still people that like wild type stuff. I still breed them myself. I still enjoy that sort of thing. But even there, line bred, you don't have new stuff coming in. You're still working within the boundaries of what you have in your collection. So, let's go on to what's Maddie's just said. Tiger Jungles, good example of polygenics. Scotty Reed says, hey, g'day, mate, if you're still here.
Mr. Reed.
Longer than only a 45 50 minute chat. Yeah.
That's what we said, Daz. Quick show, 45 minutes, 2 hours later.
Mate, Trey, didn't you do that with your comment, mate? My Commodore's like you, mate. My face says hello. What's this one? Off topic. What's this? Off topic, but seeing some snakes being sold unlicensed. Should I report them or just leave it and forget what I saw? Well, Jockle. I didn't see him.
Sadly, as my experience over forever, anything that's reported to parks about off license or whatever, nothing ever comes of it, nothing ever goes of it. So sadly, I think it's a waste of time, unless there's some sort of animal cruelty or some sort of illegal things involved in it. I wouldn't be too phased about it because parks certainly are not either. So we don't condone it. It's not the right thing to do, but unfortunately, with reptiles, there's plenty of that out there. So it is comes with the territory.
It'd be a minor thing to them. I'd say, all for doing the right thing, absolutely. And I think if you do complain, they've got to investigate it. But there is probably, I know the national parks know they have a problem with non-licensed people, hence why they're trying to look at changing the license, and which has been going for, this is New South Wales I'm talking about here. Been talking about it for years, looking at taking all class 1 animals and making them off license and all sorts of stuff. But there's probably, I'd say for every one of us that's licensed, there's probably 2 that aren't. So, I mean, we can only do the right things ourselves, and, it's up to you guys to do the right thing. But, I mean, you could probably complain constantly. The amount of stories I've heard over the years, especially working when I was wholesaling in the pet shops, the amount of times customers or shop owners would say they had a bite on the weekend, they had corn snakes and milk snakes and boas, and what should this eat and what should that eat? I mean, what do you do? I don't know who those people were, but there's plenty of it out there. David Avery, albino pepper on the agenda. Yeah, mate, they're on the agenda. There's one.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
Yeah, it's probably a bit big in here. probably photos more somewhere or other. Or, I don't know. I can't find anything when there's just photos of all sorts of stuff. Lots of yellow snake. I think there's another photo. There we go.
There we go.
Another one.
Beautiful. How old's that one now? That one's nearly a couple of years old, isn't it?
Oh, it's an adult now.
Yep.
Yeah, do you want to see that one?
Get it out.
I want to eat my face off. She's
probably hungry. Feeding day.
Probably. They're normally pretty good, but this one is a bit of a...
No, where's the hook? Get the hook. Be a man, pick it up. Let's see some blood live on the show. I just want you to get bit because I got bit.
Oh, crap.
Oh. Man, that has put on some size since I last saw that.
Yeah.
Wow.
She'd be good for this year. She looks like she's coming up for a shed. She's looking quite dull. But, yeah. She's lovely.
Beautiful.
Got a dirty tub, so she's going to get clean. She's had a couple of feeds. Still feeding, still eating. So,
what are you pairing with her this year?
I don't know yet. Can't give away all my secrets.
Still on the research chart of many options. That's the problem with a female, isn't it? Where do you invest your time and effort into?
Yeah, most likely things with more genes. Most likely.
Yep.
I'm not sure yet. I've got to get through all that sort of stuff. But yeah, she's one. Getting there. So yep. I'm up for buying natural integrade, not a hobby mix. Yeah, mate, the integrades are stunning. Just a bad name. I prefer them. I even prefer them being called Northern Rainforest Diamonds or something or other, or Port Mac Carpets was one. But yeah, mate, they are hardy animals, good-looking animals. Yeah, there's so much variation in them. Certainly nice. What pair are you excited for this season? What about you, Brent?
Oh, I'd like to probably get some caramel granites finally. I tried for a couple of years and failed. Caramel granites and caramel granite jags would be very nice. There's always been a little bit of talk around the world about there's some caramel granites out there, which I don't believe there is yet in Australia. So it'd be nice to make some actual things. We can definitely say caramel granites when they're in the clutch with some normal granites and some caramel granites.
Yep.
Be very nice.
Yeah, definitely. Nice looking critter. I got a couple of projects, I think. One, I've got some, I'm going to give Brent's thoughts a crack this year on some possets. So I've got a few posset peppers, zebjags. So I think I've got about 3 or 4 zebjag females that are all posset peppers.
Want some peppers through them?
Yeah, so I'm going to put a pepper over a couple of those girls and pepper boy over a couple of those and
try your luck with the gods, eh?
Yeah, I mean, if you had all the luck, hopefully, maybe it was yours last year and it's my turn this year. So during
pass the torch, mate.
Yeah, you hand the torch over if you don't mind.
I'd be happy to, mate. I had a season of brilliance, so I'd only be fair if you got your turn.
Yeah, so that's one. I'd love to see one of those hatch out. Obviously, I'll have pepper over zebra or zebra het pepper, which she subbed out on me last year. So so to see, I'd like to crack that pepper zeb or pepper zeb jag. It'll be a chance of a couple of new mutations to add to the list. So there's certainly something I'm excited about. There is another pepper combination I want to make some double hets on. Well, actually, triple hets,
yes,
with an incomplete dominant gene in there. So that'll be an exciting one. I might keep the lid on that one for the moment.
Some big gene combos there. If mate, another one, I'll pass the torch to you. Get it done, boy. Don't fail me. I'll be certainly trying from my end once more. Yeah.
And the other one is just to sit with it. So there's a couple, and I need my integrades, or Northern Rainforest diamonds, whatever you want to call them. They are absolutely stunning. So,
hurry up.
Yeah, I need to get them done. They have been moved into a new enclosure. They're absolutely huge now. I've given them a good feed, though I think they might have been they were borderline. What you got there?
You and bloody Dave Raptor have failed me on those for far too long. I have been waiting patiently, and you're starting to shit me a little bit. So both of you need to pull your digit out and let's go.
But you need me to do something original like this on you. I had a photo here somewhere. There it is.
There you go. Look at that.
The founding of albinos over breadlie that I made, which Brent had great success with, and I didn't. So, but I knew I had the photo.
Thank you, Daz. I do appreciate it.
That's right. I had a week of that before they both turned off each other. There you go. But like I said, when you're doing things like that and you see these opportunities, surely you've got photographic photos of it. So,
yep.
There you go.
That's where all the magic came from.
Yep. That's it. So I was trying to find the guy where my integrates were. But so they're kind of my things for this season anyway. Won't linger on that too long. We went to that. That was a Zeb Jag.
I think I'll do some weird stuff this season too. It's going to be some a year of doing some funky, non-traditional things. I think of a couple of things I'd wanted to get I got last year that had been long on the list. So there's nothing really pressing for me this year. I can do some dumb shit. Should be interesting.
Well, that's always fun. I think I might do a few. I've got a few things I've got to look at doing this season. Changing it, and I've got some new stuff that hopefully will be up to size to breed. So, we might see some new polygenic peppers hatching out this season, maybe. We'll see. Still got a bit of feeding to get on a few things, but it should be good. Well, there you go. Joe Birch has said we had two-headed snakes in one granite mat clutch. There you go. So you start talking about two heads, Brent, when you look in the mirror, and suddenly everybody's seen them.
Did they leave Dejo? I'd love to see some living. That'd be nice. It seems they got to have some problems, though. Surely that's a very, very deformed, mutated animal that's joined together, clearly. So,
yeah, I think the luck of actually having, two throats that meet into one and having basically
one heart,
single animal
and everything.
Yeah, it would be quite minimalistic. I think that's the way that see too many of them.
Yep.
What's Richard got? Multiple heads, of course, incomplete. One is zygotic twinning. There you go. And the zygotes don't separate completely during twinning separation. There you go.
I wonder how many live. I think the percentages would have to be small on that type of monozygotic action. Would not be a high success rate, I'm sure.
Well, it's probably how much is actually blended together, as to, if you've just got the two heads separate and everything else is combined. Interesting. Yep. There you go.
Joe Birch, Joy and Birch, no, they didn't. Yeah, sadly, seems to be the common theme. It'd be lovely to see a few hatch out. Certainly in Granite Max would be spectacular.
Oh, 100%. The two-headed Granite Mac.
Bring it.
You saw it on the... Yeah, I do. I actually hatched the first ones out this year. So they'll sit there and, in terms of these polygenic projects, this will be a long project. So those 50% jungle peppers that I've hatched out, once they're up to size, I will go back over to a really nice jungle again to make a high percentage jungle. And that'll make hets. And then I'll breed them back together. So I know it's a good 10-year project, but hopefully eventually we'll see, a nice bright pepper, like, maybe something like, is this boring people if I show my screenshot things?
Better than your head.
So, well, something like that. That has kind of, this is a young jag I produced, but getting that nice yellow in it. Like, that's like that jag as a baby. But yeah, so, that's kind of what I envisaged anyway. Long way. We'll get there.
Different colour variations. And how far off are you with the Bradley stuff you've done with Bradley line pepper?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hopefully this year. Try and have a look.
Yep.
I can grab my Bradley. He's just over there. So we talk about polygenics. This Bradley, if I didn't tell you this was 100% het pepper, you would not believe it at all.
Because certainly we've seen the power of some of the Bradley mixed into things, but we've seen in Murray Darling some of that red flecking in certain localities where we see that red, speckling through it. I've certainly one male I've got a ton of it in it. It's beautiful. So if you could get that redly in there.
Well, give me a sec. I need to stretch a little bit. Get up, give me 1 second, I'll show you.
Bring on the hets. Elizabeth says, Wicked, can't wait. Beautiful black and yellow peppers. I think it'll take time now, Elizabeth. All these things are going in different directions. I know with granites, there was talk about, making black and white ones, making, red stuff with the Bradley, making higher yellow stuff with the jungle. I think all of it's going to take a little bit of time. Nothing's going to happen, in 1 or 2 generations. So
there he is.
It will take time.
So this is actually a het pepper, even though he's completely in shit at the moment, or he or she.
And looks like Bradley as shit.
Yep, absolutely. And that's the fun of polygenics. Like you would expect to see some influence of Murray Darling in that, but there is like none. Now, let me just make my screen.
Even the belly on that, like that is all over Bradley looking.
Yep. I had to do a double take when I actually out. If I didn't breed it myself, I would actually have questioned it.
Show me the head on that, Daz. You can get that up there.
Yeah, let me just.
Oh, does it have the banding across the nose like a normal Bradley too?
Yep.
Wow, it does too. That is very Bradley looking.
Now, if I hadn't have read it, I'll show you the sibling to it in a sec.
You can even see the lines on the top of the head that like Murray on that. That's probably the only hint I'd say that's got some Murray blood in it.
Yep. If I didn't, as I said, if I didn't hatch it myself, I would not believe that it was anything other than a pure bredli.
Yep.
But I'll just grab the mate.
Yes, Troy, bring on the footy shorts. He's looking like he's ready to run on for the Gold Coast Titans at the moment. That's a crazy looking Bradley. You rarely get that when you mix species together. You just do not see something that's really down that one end of the scale. So that's a fortunate outcome.
And so this, you've got almost the other end of the spectrum. So these are actually clutch mates. If you have a look at this she's also, one's a boy, one's a girl. I didn't bother look. This one is also deep in shit. So you can actually see blue eyes.
Yep, but way down the Murray end.
Hang on. Give me my microphone back. It's not yours.
Could be food.
So then you've got to the other end where you've got the blues, greys, the blacks and bluey greys of the Murray. Obviously, you can't notice it as much because she's like about to shed.
In shit, but certainly the patterning screams Murray.
Yeah. So and they're siblings. So from silver pepper over the bredli.
Wow, that's crazy, isn't it? And both of those obviously 100% het pepper.
Yeah, both 100% het pepper. So
the pairing you're going to do this year?
Yeah, hopefully. Still trying to get a little bit of size on them, but there's probably no reason because of the bredli influence in them. I'm trying to get that little bit extra size onto them. But yeah, they're both feeding well and coming along well. They're certainly big enough. They're 5 foot long now, sort of thing. So
yep, certainly looking close.
Yeah. So there you go, polygenic variation within a thing. We were talking about it before. There's what you can get. So, imagine getting the same thing, that silver pepper like I put up before, with the nice reds of that bredli. So, actually making true sort of red peppers sort of thing. So, yep, I'll just chuck it back.
Yep, interesting. And I guess you get that same possibility in individuals. You may get peppers that are very red and pepper-looking reds. You may get peppers that look very Murray looking, very pure looking things in the normal black and silver colors of Murray. So these are the things you've got to explore. Sometimes one pairing won't get it done too. It's something you may need to do 2 or 3 pairings to explore all the possibilities and see all the outcomes. So I hope that one kicks off for you, Daz. That's some extreme examples of, mixing species where the outcomes can land.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's imagine that if it was a colour trait in an animal and you're trying to work out if it's an incomplete dominant mutation or not. Look at the variation.
Extreme variation in both directions.
We talk about that scale of 1 to 100. You know, in this case, we've got silver pepper and breadlie. You got one that looks like breadlie, one that looks like Murray, opposite ends.
You got one on 90 and you got one on 10. You know, it's miles apart.
Yeah. But yes, hopefully the breadlie looking one's actually the girl, the other Murray one's the male. So hopefully they'll go this season, which is why the breadlie is probably a little bit bigger than the other one. So hopefully they'll go this season. That'll be interesting to see what hatches from that. So there'll be some exciting. Hopefully, if season goes well, there'll be some exciting clutches. Some polygenic traits that pinstripes are up to size. The pinstripe albino line. I'll put up the photo before of those males and stuff. So that'll be exciting. See some more of them. Where are we up to?
I don't know. You're in control of the keyboard, mate. Next question.
Yeah, no, you still went okay. That was that. Pure jungle on next. Ryan Shepherd. Brian has 2 head of state living and feeding. Oh, cooking green. Yeah, we said that one. Triangle snake. Tremaine. What's this one? Is there any morph combination not yet in existence that you guys particularly want or hope to see created? Yes, there are. Yes, and there are plans for doing stuff that's not created. I'm sure we're not the only ones, but yeah. We do. No. What they are.
No, obviously everyone would like to see piebald carpets. You know, that's one of the big ones for everyone. I guess melanistic stuff's been out there in different forms, you know, in different species in Darwin's and in Murray's years gone. You know, both of those I think are fantastic projects. Jared Sharp's still working on anery, whatever you want to call it, but it's been years. He's done lots of work. He's going about proving out this thing beyond all doubt. So he's done plenty of hatchlings, lots of results. When you talk about 200 hatchlings and then look at the ratios in those, you can certainly then break down into, yes, certainly looks recessive, doing all the possibilities, outcrossing and doing visual to visuals, doing outcross heads to make more visuals, doing it the right way. So Anery, certainly another one that may not be mind-blowing, maybe similar thing to Xanthic, reduction in red pigment. We've seen the results of some of the Xanthic combos that are beautiful. It'd be nice to see a different angle of that coming from the Anery stuff. So it's, again, years away, but I'd love to see black. Black would be fantastic, though.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, you know, there's stuff around, so you never know. Might be lucky, but yeah, absolutely. My definite is, you know, to me, I think the holy grail that everything's pied. Not even leucistic, not anything else. To me, it's pied.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
Oh, pied just makes everything look awesome. And when you start looking at just wild type stuff, pied diamonds, pied breadlie, pied MDs, you know,
yep,
you name it, like just unreal.
Let's start again. It's everything you've ever made in the last 20 years of Morph World rebuilt. You know, start from scratch. The purists with their pure lines have a new outlet. You know, it's just if it comes out in a particular species, suddenly you can have, if it come in diamonds or it came in Murrays or something, you know, there's all those avenues then that just explode. So it's I don't know, somewhere in the world it'll happen. Eventually there's enough carpets getting made. At some point it's just whether it's in our lifetime or the next, you know.
That's it. Faye says, I've seen some sold as het calicos. That'd be the BHPs. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. Mm-hmm. Plenty of more experienced people have worked with them and it proves them out to be nothing.
Got a het unicorn for sale too.
Yes, right. James has said massive kinking issues in the Black Murray project. Well, there you go. Didn't know that.
I think you'll see that in anything that's a little bit underdeveloped, deformed, extreme mutation stuff. Kinking seems to be a common theme.
Yeah, obviously it was never meant to survive. So it looks the same as the cinnamon ball python gene. Not sure what that gene is, but no idea. So I mean, they're going to tell out of two snakes. Chris Unke, great show, guys. Very informative. That must have come from Brent's side with the microphone. Very informative. Craig Montgomery, same thing. Michelle Rommler, do you have granite peppers yet? Brent, That's a question
Oh,
for
thanks,
Brent.
Daz. Thanks, Daz.
Oh, there's the
Yeah,
basket. Brent's under it.
I'll put my hand up. I have failed on that project for the last, is it 3 years or two? Probably 3. It's been disgusting.
Oh, more than that, probably 4 or 5 now. I've been out of the warehouse.
Hey, calm
3.
down. I'll take 3. I used a young albino pepper over a pepper. What did I use? Yeah, young albino male pepper to young albino granite, which was too young. We got one from 6 done 1 year, used a different one the next year, and then tried doing young albino Murray, which Daz neglected to tell me 18-month-old peppers are useless. So I tried that over an albino pepper girl last year. So I've given up trying for the triple gene combo. And this year, now that I've done everything else I've needed to as far as albino granite jaguars and other combos, I'll be smashing it every which way and probably come up with a whole bunch of heads. And also pass the torch over to Darren to complete the mission on his side as well. So I think between us, we'll come up with something that will at least get the double heads done. I'm confident. We may well see some triple heads and finally put an end to the story of that there may be the same gene in different species. Anyone who's owned granites and peppers, I think will agree that, in my opinion, they are nothing alike. They are definitely going to make double heads and triple heads. So, but interestingly, we got to do the work. You know, we've got to make the heads. We've got to then go back and pair them up and make clutches that we'll see. You know, quarter peppers, quarter granites, and a 1 in 16 shot at the granite pepper, which will be interesting. Who knows what it's going to look like?
Yeah. I mean, the simple answer to that whole debate is, you know, when granite and pepper go together, there's a clutch of wild types.
Bingo.
That's going to answer the question, and obviously the reinforcement of that proof is going to be the pairing of them and getting the 4 different phenotypes. Yeah.
Yep.
Your wild type, your pepper granite, your peppers and your granites all in one clutch. So, you know.
Yep. And maybe others if we slip a couple of extra genes in the recipe. We'll see.
Yeah, you never know what might fall in there at some point in time. But yeah, so we are there. David Avery, start buying the Kahlua now. My wife says to me today, Kahlua and Bailey's is on special.
Oh, stock up for the 2023 season.
Yeah, I said, can you go and buy a case of each? I'll just take them all out to Brent's now.
Where's it on special at, Ness? Shoot me the details, because
yeah, I'll remind me.
I'm out.
You know.
Funny enough,
it was they're the liter bottles too. She goes, I don't know why they sent it to me. I'm like, I'm not.
Perhaps you'd Googled it a fair bit on her phone previously.
Yeah, I'm not sure. She did say, but we'll go into that later. But yeah, so
let me know. I need to know. I need to stock up.
$8 off the other, or something like
that. Yeah, bring it.
So,
yep. I mean,
Joe Birch, no, they didn't. Unfortunately, I think that's the double-headed stuff didn't survive. Manya. Has been much done with adding other genes to the integrades. I have an integrade which is poshet exanthic. Earlier, cool. The diamonds seem to be fairly untouched with a lot of stuff, and that probably leads down maybe a little bit more difficult to breed with other things, a bit like the red late season. I'd probably put it down to that. Obviously, if it's poshet exanthic, then it's obviously not going to be integrate coastal, I'm assuming, unless it's jungle exanthic, not sure. I know there's obviously people have got albino into diamond.
Yep.
I know they've done
visual stunt.
Now that it's been mentioned, you know, it's something I've been toying. I haven't done that project. I've sort of like got enough on my own plate to toil, but I have contemplated maybe this year with a few extra female albs up to size, actually throw my integrades and make some albino type stuff. But I got enough projects going on. I don't really want to know if I want to add to the pile. But
sure.
Maybe certainly different. No. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I hope diamonds pop something out in time. There's really no proven morphs here in Australia for diamonds, so there's been a lot of photogenic lines and some beautiful line bred animals over the years. I've seen some high green animals. black and whites, high yellows. There's been some beautiful lines established and lost in the hobby as such, but there's nothing like a true mutation. Overseas they've got Stardust, and I know there's a guy overseas working on a piebald looking diamond as well. If those things could pop up, diamonds would boom. They would explode in popularity. I mean, I feel like diamonds are already exploding. There's people messaging me constantly the last couple of years for diamonds because people have sort of neglected them. They're not so much, well bred in the hobby because 5 years ago no one wanted them. They were $100 snake you couldn't sell, so people just stopped producing them. Now there's none around, so everyone wants them again. It's that cycle. So
yeah, I remember when I bred mine, they were like $350 each for ages, and they dropped down to $250, and I ended up stopped breeding them as they come down and sold them all on, moved them all on.
Yep.
But
and they just disappeared.
Yeah, it's what happens though. Like even I had someone messaging me about roughies. They had a striped roughy, and they don't know if anyone crossed roughies with something else. I'm like, not that I know of, not that I have any interest in that, but. Same thing, I stopped selling them because the market came down. They're class 2 animal, they're harder to sell. Not every state can have them, but no one.
Everyone who wanted one had one, I think. And bred them. And when everyone sort of got them and then bred them, and they were down to $350 each, no one suddenly was interested in buying them anymore. So why would you breed them when it took 2 years to sell the clutch you've got? You're not about to sort of repair them, So
I sold the adults, kept the pair back, which are down the back here, and one of the upright enclosures down there. So I'll probably breed them. Oh well, I'll give them a crack anyway. I've never had them paired. I've just always just fed them and kept them. So I might actually pair them up this year and give them a run. Get a couple of roughies.
Yep,
it's nice for something different. Let's carry on. Elizabeth, Wicked, can't wait for some beautiful black and yellow peppers. Me too. I reckon they'll look stunning. Nice high yellow. Joshua Kenway, poly is everything. Yeah, absolutely.
Can be with work.
Yeah, 100%. There's a long time, but you can start taking, genetically inheritable genes into different, areas, phases, colors, shapes, patterns, sort of thing. So it's up. There's so much you could do if you want to dedicate your time. Like Z-Max, putting all their time and effort into jungles and zebras and stuff like that, and making some studies. Give them, more years, and they'll just get better and better. Yeah.
Yeah, in lots of directions too. They've taken a species and exploded it. So
and that's all it takes. You start to get known for having the best of that in around. Like. Troy Blizzard, he must be picking on me footy shorts. Picking on the footy shorts.
He was, mate. He was looking at the size of your calves, and he was wondering when you were going to pick up, number 10 for Gold Coast Titans.
I've got to get back to gym tomorrow, that's for sure. I've been slack. Yeah. Scored COVID kilos, I think.
Get it done.
Yeah, that's it. What's this one, Elizabeth? When doing polygenics like that, would the more normal-looking hets like that bredli produce more drastic-looking babies? Theoretically, yeah, you would think so, because you want the reds in there to come through into the peppers. That's the whole idea. So if I actually had two, let's say the bredli's at 99 end of the scale, and if I had another one that sat on the 75 end of the scale, it also looked like my bredli, I'd be excited about that, because you've suddenly got very little chance, or far less chance, of those, let's say, blues and greys from the Murray coming through, because you've already got most of that gone. You've got two animals that are, let's say, highly red-based, being produced to make red peppers. So there's a better chance of getting that colour form into your offspring. So no different if you had stripes. You had one that was really striped and one that was 3/4 striped at that 75% mark of the scale, for argument's sakes. You're going to get a much better striping in the clutch, as opposed to one that was striped and one that had bugger all striping in it. So, yes.
The gene's going to come through. The pepper's going to be there. It's just how much red you can add to it.
Yeah. Off-topic. Matthew Trace. Off-topic question. How are you two going to explain the snakes in the nursing home in a couple of years? What do you mean a couple of years, mate? Come on, give us some credit. Could have said within a decade.
Well, we're going to get shorter Max, right? Shorter racks made for the wheelchair access. That's all we really need. It's quite simple.
And I think what happens as you get older, you start to get out of carpet pythons and you get into Antaresia. That's what the old retirees get. Sorry, Pete, Marty, and all other readers. I thought that's the retirement snakes, because you can sit there and little drawer and your little hook comes out, and it's easy to do when you're in your wheelchair.
You're not as strong, so you can handle lifting up those big snakes anymore. Marty's so old he lost all his hair, so
that's exactly right. Pete's gone grey.
A lot easier. Yeah.
Pete even had to colour his skin in because it was going all flaky and old and decrepit, so now it's got colours and stuff on it. Nursing home. Jeez, how rude, young whippersnappers. Michelle says gammons can be very red. No, I haven't done gammons. I mean, they're so close. They're Murray's anyway, realistically. I mean, I know Simon Stone was like, gammons. It's just a locality type. Do
you have any?
Nice. Well, if you want, if you want to go and look at gammons, and then I actually sent this to Simon. We won't go into that discussion I had with him. But
Simon
Stone.
Yeah.
Long time ago, long story, old news. That's actually that's the male that produced the first pepper, and like you said with the reds. Mate, I said that to Simon. We won't go into the debate, and I said, mate, this looks exactly like your Gammon Rangers carpet.
Yep.
He had zero comment for it, other than, well, I'm the first person that's been there and used to collect snakes. I'm like, how do you know that?
Yeah.
Do you have a tracker at the Gammon Rangers that lets you know when people have been there?
A few animals in the ranges there.
Yeah. So that's an absolute dead ringer for a Gammon Rangers carpet for anyone that's not seen one. And so
few around,
Yep. And
so there was a phase there, people were raving about the Jags mixed into that sort of thing, and there was lots of debate how good they could be, but very few people working with them.
Yep. And that was Mum. So she's one of the typical grey MD. But yeah, that's Dad. Still got Dad. So sadly Mum died of tumours, but yeah. So there you go. So, no, I haven't actually crossed them into gammons as such, but that's probably what they look like now is probably very similar to what they look like in gammons. I mean, they are Murray's anyway.
So you're saying you wild caught it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, under permit.
Of course.
No, I don't know where it come from, but that was, won't go into the the debate, let's say, between Simon and myself, but yeah, he was trying to claim that it can't be this, can't be that. I'm like, well, that looks just like your gammons. You're going to tell me it's not gammons then? Looks the same.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, yep. Troy's going pure black. Yes. Polycarps will be the dream. Absolutely. Huge game changer. Yes. That was it. Bring on Stardust. Yeah, they look different. I don't think they actually survive very well, though. There don't seem to be many around. They've been around for quite a long time.
Not heaps overseas, but someone posted that picture of a couple of animals, or one animal, in the Blue Mountains recently, but certainly looks a little bit Stardusty, maybe. So I believe out in the wild there's probably quite a few things lurking around out there.
Oh, quite possibly. Who knows? It might not even be in the wild anymore. And Zeke, how are you, mate? How we can put two hopper rats in one feed? Can I use wool thread? Yeah, you can. You can use what's the thread they use to tie them together?
Hemp twine.
Hemp twine. You can use hemp twine to tie them together. But often you find if it takes one, if you wait till basically the tail disappears, so you just see the tail go on, or it's just disappearing, often you can offer a feed at that same point, and once it's kind of down in its throat that little bit further, mate, offering another one, I'll often just grab it and I'll just swallow it down. And I'll push one down and start swallowing another one.
Poke it in.
Yeah. So before you actually tie two together, offer it a feed, wait till it's gone down a little bit, offer it another one. You kind of want to get it at the point where it's still swallowing rather than it's down further. Some will hesitate going for a second one sometimes. So while they're in that chewing, swallowing motion, and they're opening that mouth up, that's the good time to offer another, let them have a sniff. Some will rather wait, but yeah, that's certainly one way of doing it before you actually need to tie them together. So, Matt Loveridge. How are you, Matt? Well,
YouTube boy, hey, mate.
Boy, yeah. Got a couple of gammons, and they do seem a bit different MDs, but I agree. Don't think they would add much to pepper. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, by all means, give it a crack. I'm not saying don't do it if you've got some, but there's plenty of other red MDs around. There's some of the southwestern Queensland type ones around, and Western New South Wales ones. There's a few of that red type Murray around. I just always had the intention of, with the peppers, once I kind of got that road, that where do you go to get the most red lie? So it was either go out and buy old Murray's to outcross. I've got a big girl that I outcross too, so I think bread lie is going to give me the best results that I'm kind of looking for.
Yeah, there is one locality of Murray's of very high red speckling in it. I can't remember what locality it was. There was one that had quite a lot of red in it. It was better than others, but I guess there's going to be that in any particular lines as well. But
yeah, some of the I don't know, some of the early photos I had, the Murray, like the early pepper type stuff, you can actually see some of the red flecking in them.
Yep. I remember seeing some at an expo I was amazed at. They were just plain Murrays, but they were spectacular. Joe Birch says Cooper Creek, possibly. It doesn't ring a bell. It could be, but I remember it just being at an expo. It might have been Hawkesbury Reptiles, maybe. Somebody had a locality that were just stunning for just your straight up Murray.
Oh, probably Kelly Nowak. She's always bred some local Murrays. They're quite nice red ones. So it could be Kelly. She normally sits there with Cindy and Marie.
Yeah, it was before pepper stuff might have even been released too. Years ago. So it might have been when peppers were first out. It might have been that Castle Hill show even. I just remember thinking, wow, that could be something beautiful to work, down the track with. It's such a nice line.
Yeah, they're quite nice. So
I'd like to do some digging on Cooper Creek though as well. It might be something else nice. I just find the peppers that have that red, speckling through them are just spectacular. I've got a young male that's just beautiful. When he sheds and that red pops back through again, it's fantastic. Mr. Slim Shady, as my wife named him.
You never sell that now.
Definitely not. He's a keeper forever. Beautiful animal.
Yeah. I was trying to. You can see some of the photos hard because a lot of these are just copies, but that red I showed you before, when that gammon range looking type one has come through on some of the original Murrays, but yeah, there's plenty of variation in them now, obviously with outcross. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see how the bread lie affects it. I think with that dash of red. I mean, if you had pure peppers and put them over some low cow, if you want to keep the line pure and outcross them to some really nice, high red MDs, if you get yourself hands on some, certainly make it a polygenic variation, that's for sure, and take the line in a different rate. It's not a direction I'm taking them in, but by all means, like we say, there's plenty of options, and there's one.
Yep. And that's something for the purists, that they really want to see absolute pure high red Murrays. With the pepper gene in there, absolutely. Yep.
I mean, Dave, thanks very much, mate. No worries, mate. You got my on Messenger, say you need help, mate. Just hit me up. It's all good. What's Matt Trace? Tuck the nose between the back legs of the first rat. Oh, there you go. I don't know if Indeed saw that one. I'm assuming you're talking about when you're trying to feed them, Matt, not do something else with them.
Yeah, tying them in. Yeah, certainly when I used to tie animals together, I'd tie the back legs to the front legs of the animal behind it, just put their arms crossways and wrap the twine around it, and I'll tie it up, double knotted, and trim it off. And the less twine that's going inside the animal, the better. Although it's hem twine and completely natural, it's totally safe. I always just felt that the smaller amount of that twine that goes in the snake, the better. People often talk about, I can get tangled and stuck inside them and cause complications in digestion, but I always put the back legs to the front legs of the animal behind it, so their sort of head was tucked into the belly, like Matt said, and never had an issue. You could basically daisy chain 2, 3, 4 animals together if you needed to. I had some mice feeders that were a pain that were big. You could tie 3 or 4 together in one go, and they just keep chewing it all down. So,
oh, nice. There you go. So another way. It's all about getting feed. So here we go. Matty Trey's got some updates on some critters he got from us, Brent.
Star Smasher Rat. So that's an animal that I sent up to Mr. Travs. It was annoying the shit out of me. It was a very poor feeder, and I sent it up to Mr. Travs, who would have far more patience and do some more work with it. And he's turned it around after not too much time. So well done, Mr. Travs.
Yep, and he's doing the same with me. He's bought into a polygenic project I've been working on for a few years and decided to pass the animal, the adult pair on. And I had a visual animal that was doing the same thing, doing mating. I just didn't have the time to constantly force feed. Just, to get an animal feeding well through force feeding, it needs to be consistent and regular, and I just wasn't consistent enough to get it done. So I just gave it as a gift to Matt. Said, you bought these, you have this one for free, and good luck. So,
geez, Matt did well last year, didn't he? With a few freebies, didn't he? Hey?
I reckon. Well, if it's now assist feeding, it won't be long before it'll start, mate. The thing was as placid as it showed zero attempt at wanting to eat from day dot, and has never shown any interest whatsoever. So, nothing wrong with it. Just doesn't want to eat. So.
Good on him. If he got it going, mate, he did the work. So, like you say, it's fortunate when you have less animals, you can spend a little bit more time on them and get them going a bit better. So, good on him, mate. And I'd much rather see an animal go to someone like that who can put in the effort and get it going and get it established and do well, than it sit here for me and do nothing for a long time and sadly end up probably being goanna food or something, So,
100%.
That was a beautiful. I think it was a Sunglow Zebra or something I sent to him that I had marked as a holdback. It was absolutely beautiful out of the egg, but he just didn't want to eat. And I tried live with it, tried a few things with it, and didn't want to play ball for me. But good on you, Mr. Travs. Well done. Look forward to seeing it as an adult.
I'm sure it's not the first one you've given away, and I'm sure it's. I've given away plenty of snakes over the years in similar scenarios and circumstances where I've not been able to sell it. So right place, right time. You never know what you get from us.
Funny enough, I've not given away many. I've always been very hesitant to give away stuff like that. I hate things leaving.
I don't give them to random people.
So you pick your mark, But Matt knows what he's doing. He's bred stuff before, so he knows what he's in for when it comes to an animal of that nature. So like you say, you pick your mark. But I'm glad when they kick on, mate. It's good to see.
Yeah, that's it. 100%. Like. We breed it, we bring it to life, we give it all the opportunities. So I think it's our job to, to give them all the best chance of surviving and doing everything.
Find at the right home.
Yeah, I think it's our job. I know people don't do that and they do other terrible things, but I don't think that's the way we should do things. So it's never been an option for me. It's always you breed it, you look after it, you get it feeding, you give it every chance to survive that you can, and then you pass it on.
Yep.
So. What's that say here for you? Yeah, indeed, it was. Brent leaning towards him being nervous about using the muscles to get it down rather than being absolutely shit.
It happens. It happens.
Yeah. We got hey, Deb. How you going?
Mr. Lux.
Yep, mate, Wayne's doing well. He's having a bit of a struggle. Yeah, I know, Deb. I warned you the other day. You talk too much. So
I said to Daz before this show, let's crack this out in 45 minutes. And here we are at 2 hours and 48 minutes. And
I think it's the problem. I sit at home and clean snakes all day and talk to myself.
That's where all the good ideas come from now.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. See, then suddenly Brent gets on and it's like, someone to talk to. Says,
it's like when I sent you that random message today. Well, I'm feeding, when you're in the racks and you're all alone and your brain goes to wild places, and I just send you a text of, while I was feeding, I had this thought, Dad. What do you think about this? Like, what dickhead come up with this idea? It just sparks a whole new world.
Then my head goes off. Oh, now that you mentioned that, jeez, fun stuff. But yeah, good to see you in the house anyway, Deb. And say hello to Wayne. Hope he's doing well. Not well, poor bloke. Well, I guess at that point in time, we should probably start to round this up. This was just going to be a bit of a catch-up and a chat about proving stuff out. But yeah, I mean, it's good. Like
Yep.
more questions is good. We can talk, chat,
Bounce
try to
around.
help people, do whatever.
We'll do a show in a couple of weeks on quarantine. Was the next one we were talking about?
Yeah,
of
was
good measures for quarantine and testing.
Yep, it's only simple and short, but there's obviously people are reading stuff. There's a lot of some of the Facebook long chats that were recently. There was a lot of throwing at viruses in collections and quarantine and
around.
this, that, and the other. Yeah, like I think it's it's an evil necessity, and as I mentioned before when I went out to Michelle at Richmond Vets out there. What's it? North Richmond Veterinary Clinic.
North Richmond.
Yep. Michelle. Great reptile vet, and she said the amount of viruses and mycoplasma and stuff that's coming through snakes is unbelievable. So,
scary.
Yep. The coastal boy's coming along well with his little throat infection. He's due for his injection tomorrow. So,
still sucking some goop out, or he's pretty much.
Yeah, he's due for a goop extraction. So probably tomorrow I'll get a syringe up there and try to drain some of that out. Still, the swelling's still there, but he's doing everything right, smashing food and doing that. But I'll just keep up the Rachel or Fordham, whatever it was she gave me, injections. And actually did a bit of a film of doing the injection. Showed just an easy way of getting an injection in. If you've got a snake that's feeding, give it a feed, wait till it wraps up. Then give it the injection.
Third way down the body, third down from the back, bang, smash it in.
Yep, in under the scales, in you go. Intramuscular, so it's all good. Yep. But anyway, we got any others? Then caught the end. Thanks. Tonight, bloody gas baggers. Talk soon. Yes. Wayne is doing well there. It's good to. Yes, definitely. We'll talk soon. And as we spoke on the phone, we'll definitely have you down for our next one if you get the time. Great chat for only the second half. No, tomorrow I'll back to start. Check what I missed. Have a good one. No worries. Thanks, mate. Appreciate you watching. So liking and following and all that sort of stuff. I do dribble a lot. So possibly the up.
While he's live and when he's not too, Ness is always saying how many hankies she carries around when it goes out shopping with him. He's dribbling everywhere.
More like a bucket. Right award. Quarantine were a great one to watch. Got 5 new hatches coming, 4 from different breeders. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something you need to do. There's plenty of people that talk about it and say they do it, with plenty of evidence that says they don't. So that will be interesting.
Necessary evil. Sadly, it's wild out there.
Yeah, we'll have to get Michelle on for a chat. I think we might have to have a talk to her.
Yeah.
It would be great to get her on. She's,
get the facts from the experts.
Well, can't argue with the ones that treat the animals. So, Anyway, all right. Well, thanks, guys, for dropping in, saying hello. I'm sorry we've probably bored most people for near on 3 hours. God, you talk too much, Brent.
Man, my apologies for Darren talking so much, but it was a good short show. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah. So, Brent, if someone wants to get in contact you, where can they find you?
KHP Reptiles on Facebook or webpage www.khpreptiles.com.au, or lots of people catch me just as Brent Smith on Messenger. You, Daz?
Yeah, Rally by Design on Facebook and Instagram and also YouTube. So hit us up and give us a message. We're always happy to help. We get messages from heaps of people. We don't always get back to you straight away, but we always get back to you when we get half a chance. So thanks for dropping in. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. And we will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks, guys. Peace out.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.